are much more interested in unions, and they're ready to unionize, and they're ready in the South to unionize.
Wood says 925 workers at Corpus Christi Army Depot joined the union earlier this year, and there are hundreds of others at other Southern work sites. Wood says the South is changing, and unions are working hard with strategies to sign up more Southern workers.
This is just the beginning. We have put together a strategic plan, and we have people coming to us and wanting unions, and we've got the organizers, and we have good contracts, we have good outcomes, we have a very strong union, and union that stands up for its members, and that's the secret to success.
Graduate student employees at Yale University are hopeful that Yale will soon begin talking with them about recognizing their union and bargaining a contract. Aaron Greenberg is chair of Yale's Graduate Employees and Students Organization.
We have made clear both in the spring and then just a few days ago exactly what we're looking for. 60 miles to the north, 60 miles to the south, two universities found a way to enter into a dialogue and to negotiate with graduate employees about these issues. We hope that that happens imminently here and that we have a chance to sit down with our administration and talk about the reasons why we want to negotiate the kind of contract that we want, the kind of election that we want, and that we actually have a chance to talk with them.
Greenberg says there's a wave of academic worker organizing happening around the U.S.
It's a really exciting time for organizing academics across the country, not just in the Northeast. And the wave of organization is one that we're riding. It's one that's gotten our members very excited. And we think it's one that will ultimately allow us to succeed in sitting down with the university and actually talking about so many of the issues around our wages, around our benefits, a grievance procedure, and around really having a voice in the university as it grows.
The Indonesian Supreme Court has upheld a lower court ruling there convicting a former boss of prohibiting formation of a labor union. The court said it violates Article 28 of Indonesia's labor unions law. Hutomo Haidiat was convicted of blocking the workers from organizing at a furniture company. He fired 107 workers to bust the union organizing effort. He was sentenced to a year in prison, but East Java's High Court increased that sentence to 18 months, and the Supreme Court upheld the sentence. The criminal boss, though, has apparently fled the country rather than do his time for violating the labor law. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Go ahead, this time is my time. Alright, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Education deform. I'm going to talk about what's going on down in Philadelphia. A student from the Philadelphia School District are going to grace our program with her presence, talk about what's going on, what the students think. I mean, we've heard an awful lot about what the SRC and the politicians want. Heard a little bit of what the teachers are fighting for, but it'll be interesting to hear what the students have to say. That'll be interesting. Also going to talk about, Wingnut. It's Friday, thank goodness. Wingnut weekend review. Are we all going to die of Ebola? Another story of Ebola. Somebody walking around the city of New York who has the disease, has the illness. Should we be fining people who have been exposed to it and then just go along their merry way without really I'm kind of the mindset at some point you have to take some responsibility. If you're exposed to something, kind of, even if it's self-quarantined, just for the because you don't want to do something to harm your fellow man. At least that's my thought. We'll talk about that. Also, the election's coming up. Just a little over a week away, November 4th. I hope it is marked on the calendar. I hope it's big red ink, highlighted, maybe fuchsia, some kind of off color that's going to go, hey, I should remember to vote. We'll also talk with Jim Byrne, the head of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. I'm going to talk about the getting out to vote, why this election is so very important. And for me, one of the things that I've focused on, well, pretty much from the beginning of this program, because I've always said education's that hill that the working class of this country has to die on. It's the one we fight for because, look, past generations fought so diligently to get this, and it cost lives. It cost hardship, and I'm struck by how easily we allow things to be taken away. And I look at my kids and I look at the opportunities I hope that they're having, because I know I've read the studies, I've read the results. Someone with a high school education does all right. Someone with a college education does a lot better. Someone with an advanced degree does even better than that. And it's this one time in their life that they get this opportunity. And you look at the last 3 years of the governor that we have sitting in the governor's mansion right now, the priorities that his administration has pursued. He pursued this business agenda that has failed. Look, when you take office and you're 10th in the country in job creation, and after 3.5 years of your almost 4 years of your policy, you're dead last. Tried, failed, let's move on. I think Hillary Clinton said today, and accurately so, supply side economics, voodoo supply side Reaganomics should be in the trash heap of history. At some point, we've got to go, it didn't work. No matter how long you scream, it's going to work. No matter how long you try, no matter how much you do, you double, triple, quadruple down, it doesn't work. So what we've done is, these last 4 years, we've taken from kids' opportunities and handed off to these business interests. And I keep going, what happens in another 10, 15 years when these kids get to college and they're not ready? And oh, by the way, we've defunded higher education as well. And I point to this report just released by the folks over at the Keystone Research Center and the Pennsylvania Budget. Now, we know you go to college, you got a better shot of maybe getting to that middle class. Not guaranteed, but maybe a shot, especially the kids today who are just saddled with massive amounts of debt. And then, of course, no opportunity to get that first job. Well, here's what the Keystone Research Center is saying. They're saying, look, we've reduced funding for higher ed. We've cut funding for higher ed. And what's happened? Well, you know what happens. If you cut from one side, it's got to go up on the other, right? Tuition for college kids in this Commonwealth up. In fact, you look at the numbers that they point out. Here, since 2010, Corbett's year, Corbett's first budget, 2010, 2011. Since then, Pennsylvania has cut higher education funding by almost 12%. The fifth largest reduction in the country. And by cutting that, what you saw is $80 million slashed from the state-run facilities, about $90 million. And there's no money going back into it. By having this $90 million cut, this almost 12% cut, that puts Pennsylvania at 48th among the rest of the country in funding higher ed. And in a tuition increase of 18%. And not just the tuition increase, but also, and this is the other part that doesn't really get talked about, the gutting of programs. I understand more than 95 programs have been cut from the state institutions of higher learning. 900 teachers and professors and support staff, they've been cut, eliminated, gone, done. Now, as I've talked to a couple of college students who are saying, look, I'd like to graduate, but I need this class, can't get into it. There aren't enough of these classes to get through. So it's going to take the extra year, and it prolongs it. And it makes not just that 18% increase in tuition that much more painful, but that entire extra year that much more painful. And, I've had these conversations with people my age, and I'm 47. I remember, I was going to college back in the mid-'80s. In the mid-'80s, here in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth was picking up about 2/3 of the cost of a higher education. That's how we were funding it. We said as a priority, as a Commonwealth, we're going to fund education because that's our kids' future, and that's what we're going to do. Since the 80s, that has completely gone around. Because in the 80s, you had 2/3 of it picked up by, the taxpayers, by the state, by the local municipalities, whatever. And about 1/3 of it was picked up by the student. You took out a little student loan, your parents paid a couple of bucks, you worked during the summer, you made it through. And I think most people my age think it's still that way. The reality is it's completely flip-flopped. Right now, the state picks up only 1/4 of the cost. So who picks up the other 3/4? Yeah, student loans. Why do you think we have a $1 trillion student loan industry? And what's frustrating to me is we know that investing in education is good for our economy. It's good for the future of not just the state, but the country. We know that investing in higher ed is not only good for the Commonwealth, but good for the country. But yet, all we got running around is corporate going, I didn't raise taxes. Well, you didn't raise taxes. Okay, well, I'll give you that. You personally didn't raise taxes. Your policy caused tons of increases in taxes. And my property tax went up, all the fees and all of the things that I have to pay for permits and licensing and all that stuff went up. And oh, by the way, if you've got a kid going to school, your costs have gone up. So maybe by his pen, it didn't happen, but by his actions, it absolutely did. And I got to wonder how many kids now can't afford to go to college because that tuition has gone up that much higher. To me, we got some serious problems. And you look at the fact, and this is one of those things that just blew my mind. For a student right now, graduating from a state institution, a 4-year state institution, about $31,000 in debt. $31,000 in debt at the end of it, with no job, no guarantee of a job, none of that. Makes Pennsylvania the 3rd highest state in the country for student loan debt. And why is that? I go back to this governor's policy. I remember his first budget. They wanted to cut education, higher ed funding by almost half. Then they just settled on 20% that first year, if you remember. And I remember there were kids coming across the country, running from all of the colleges across the country to the Capitol, literally running. They had cross-country teams that were running from all of the different colleges across the state to highlight the fact that, hey, we're not getting screwed in this. So they, instead of half, 20%. And I would argue that's a huge, huge ripoff. And that $90 million that's been stripped hasn't been put back. And I argue right now it's got to go back because that, at the least that. Because, look, we continue down this path. Working class kids don't get to go to college. You're not going to be able to afford it, or you're going to be saddled with a lifetime of debt that you can never discharge. You can never get rid of. And that is kind of what the banks would like, because they still want to get that industry back. So again, come November 4th, another one of those things I think we should be thinking about. Today, later on, we're going to be talking to some folks that last night I went to Ask Me Council 13's education night. I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of members there to talk about what's important to them. We'll play those interviews and so much more. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Say the USA is drowning in grafted lies. Say the USA and resume the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're looking for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Let's go to Manhattan District Court. In a rare occurrence, the UN is being sued by victims of the 2010 cholera outbreak in Haiti. Many of those victims, and an increasing roster of scientists and human rights lawyers, say a contingent of UN peacekeepers from Nepal introduced the disease to the earthquake-ravaged island. They contend the UN was negligent in deploying peacekeepers from a country experiencing a cholera outbreak of its own, and for building inadequate sanitation facilities in Haiti, where raw sewage from the peacekeepers entered the country's primary water source. Over 700,000 cholera infections have been recorded since 2010, along with more than 8,000 deaths. The UN contends it's immune from prosecution, but today one lawsuit got its day in court, with American and Haitian lawyers arguing on behalf of 5 victims and their families that the UN should be forced to account for its actions.
This case is about whether the United Nations can essentially operate with impunity when it has refused to provide any kind of remedies to the victims.
Beatrice Lindstrom is an attorney with the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, and she represented the plaintiffs in court today.
The United Nations stands for the promotion of human rights for all, and that should include Haitians. And so we asked the Secretary General to listen to Haitians when they ask for justice in this case.
The UN often cites that it's poured money into the fight to contain cholera, but when pressed to respond to victims, the organization's spokespeople and officials are either evasive or adamant they did no wrong. Here was spokesman Farhan Haq this afternoon.
The United Nations has maintained its immunity from legal process in respect of this lawsuit. In light of this, the United Nations will not appear in court.
When the U.S. District Court decides whether or not the suit against the UN can go forward, you'll hear about it here. For more global news headlines, visit Talk.
Media Matters Minute. I'm Chance Seals, the host of Fox and Friends, joined by Fox business host Maria Bartiromo, misleadingly attributed a drop in McDonald's quarterly profits to widespread calls for a minimum wage increase.
Meanwhile, McDonald's, the Golden Arches, reporting a 30% drop in quarterly profits. Why? Well, it turns out workers' wages might be to blame.
Well, the issue really is this is the implication of raising the minimum wage for certain companies. I mean, something's got to give. The money comes from somewhere. So at some point, a company will say, okay, we have a higher expense base because we're raising the minimum wage. We've got to do something somewhere else. In this case, they're going to automation. They're changing certain jobs to computers.
But Fox and Friends failed to know that McDonald's CEO Don Thompson cited, quote, some corporate image problems as an explanation for the drop in profits. Fox hosts also ignored that earlier this year, Thompson announced McDonald's would, quote, support legislation that moves forward on a minimum wage increase. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Right. Well, the question was asked of me, and if you saw the whole press conference, and the media there didn't, bat an eye at it. I said, you can't make somebody watch it. They can put the monitor in front of them, but you can't make them watch it.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. There was music there. I know there was at one point. But that's one of my favorite clips of the Corbett years. You can't make the woman watch while we're taking an ultrasound of her body. Can't do that. Not at all. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Wow, the music just didn't go. Anyway, today, big rally in Harrisburg. Tom Wolfe had, looked like probably a little over 1,000 people showed up. Excellent turnout. I got stuck in traffic thanks to I'm gonna say this another one of the Republican bag of tricks. I got stuck in traffic on 81. Everything was just dead for at least a half an hour and didn't make it. But here again, November 4th. Make sure it's on the calendar and make sure you get out to vote. Anyway, here to talk about this election and why it's so important, I've asked Jim Byrne. He's the chairman of the Democratic Party here in Pennsylvania. Jim, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Rick.
So, you hear this statement all the time. This is the most important election ever, Jim. I kind of think this is a pretty big one.
Oh, they're all very big. I mean, they're all very important. This one's very critical. I mean, when you see the folks that we've seen, the moderate Republicans and the independents, in the sense of outrage and abandonment that we've seen in the conversations you and I have had to reflect that over the last 3.5 years, this is a big one. This governor has really sparked something, ignited something, and not in a positive way. Pennsylvanians are scared. They've lost their adult basic. Their children are in overcrowded classrooms. They're falling behind. Pick an issue that you and I have discussed over and over again, and it has really formed a movement across the Commonwealth to come and make a change in 10 more days.
I keep seeing these commercials on TV, and look, when you're an incumbent governor and you're running on a platform of that, the other guy's horrible, it kind of tells you that you don't have anything positive to run on. But this idea that I didn't raise your taxes, to me, is just ludicrous. Because across the board, you look at the property tax increases, the permit fees that have increased, all of the licensing fees that have increased, the cost and tuition for college students have gone up. There have been massive tax increases. They've just hidden them in different places.
Absolutely. He says he didn't do it, but yet he either calls it a fee, some of the items you've done, or he fires a bank shot by refusing to do something that he's obligated to do. He forces someone else to do it instead. It's still his tax increase. If it's a school district having to do it because of his failed leadership, it's still connected to him. And your listeners really have to really focus on that. And in addition to that, whether you're for the transportation bill or against it, there were powerful debates on both sides of that issue. The important thing for Pennsylvanians to take away from the entire conversation is that Tom Corbett lied. He signed one of those Norquist no tax pledges, and he broke it again and again and again. So when he tells you, I'm not going to do this or I'm going to do that, how can anyone in Pennsylvania trust him? And that's a big issue, and folks are paying attention to that.
Yeah, I mean, on the transportation bill front, I thought it should have been much bigger. In fact, his own transportation commission that he appointed said that it should have been considerably more than what it ended up being, because everybody that I've talked to on the transportation front says that what they've done isn't even enough to bring us up to even, let alone improve and make advancements. It's just keeping us from falling further behind faster. Right. So his own folks don't agree with it. There were a lot of folks in our party that weren't necessarily for it either. And I don't want to get into the weeds on the debate pro and con. There's a lot of valid arguments to make on both sides of it. Well, I've asked folks in our party who may not have been for the bill to remember, and they have, to their credit, is that the governor who brought it to the table had broke promises and lied about how he was going to make it happen. You just can't negotiate or do business with someone when you don't know what their end game is and you can't take what they say at face value. Yeah, and I look at I go back to the priorities, and to me, it's about the priorities, and one you can pick one out or another one out and say, well, there were isolated incidents for maybe this or for maybe that, but the overall 4-year term, you see very decidedly the same kind of Reaganomic mentality. We're going to enrich the very wealthy, and we're going to take it out on the poor. And you look at the kicking 41,000 people off of adult basic, the 90,000 kids off of CHIP, the 70,000 people off of the general assistance budget. I mean, you go through bang after bang after bang, and it's very decidedly anti-worker, anti-poor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A governor who he kept his promises. He kept it to that small circle of corporate donors and top level sponsors at the expense of the rest of us. Well, fortunately, we were prepared for the worst, and we responded, all of us here in Pennsylvania. The Democratic Party built the best communications team in the United States for a state organization. And every time he made one of these moves there, too, in your efforts and a lot of people's efforts, all of us together showed Pennsylvanians why he was doing things and why they were wrong. It was no accident that before this primary in May, that he was at 24 points, because all of us together communicated an effective and accurate message about his inability to lead adequately. And, that was half the equation. The other half was finding the right nominee to finish what we all started and worked on for 3.5 years. And we have that nominee, as evidenced by the over 1,000 people who came out today and the hundreds of people that are showing up on his bus tour to support our candidate.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say, "Well, okay, I understand that Tom Corbett's bad. We've had a horrible 4 years under him, and I'm to steal the Reagan line. We are decidedly not better off than we were 4 years ago when we were 10th in the nation in job creation, and now we are dead last. So we're definitely not better off. But why is the other guy better?"
He brings a business model to the table, a track record of inclusion, a track record of communication, someone who doesn't think in linear fashion, who thinks in a quantum fashion, sees a lot of moving parts, understands that to make government work as complicated as our Commonwealth is, that anyone who has a vested interest in the success of the state must be invited to the table and weigh in, build consensus, and move forward. Tom Corbett is a two-dimensional linear thinker in a business that requires quantum thinking. Tom Wolf has a proven track record on being able to do that. And that's going to be the critical difference.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that Republicans in the House and the Senate are waiting for this because they want to be able to have a relationship and a communication with a governor. They have not had it. You've read the headlines. You've seen it in the papers. I'm not saying anything new.
Yeah.
People in his own party have no relationship with this man. It's bad enough that he's played partisan politics with us and boxed us out, but when he's boxing out his own leaders, we have a serious problem.
No, that's why I've always called him Punxsutawney Tom. He pops his head out every once in a while, sees his shadow, and then ducks back in.
He's just not. He's not built. He was never cut out for this type of responsibility, and we have suffered for it. And the fact that he attempts to kick the can down the road and blame others for his own shortcomings, that's not what leaders do. And for your listeners and others out there who have heard what Tom Corbett has tried to say about the $1 billion in education and his attempts to blame it on a prior administration, folks need to remember that we can debate the pros or cons or how that money got here or how it was supposed to be used, and you could agree with what he says or you could disagree. The point is, he inherited a situation. Leaders are defined on how they deal with a crisis, and they are remembered more for what they did in a crisis than what they did when times were good. He failed. He dropped the ball on that issue. I would suggest he never picked it up. A real leader, a real governor would have looked for a solution. Let's find some line items in this budget. Let's cut some fats from some of my friends' line items, and let's move it over to this education hole. We may not be able to get all of it back, but we can certainly make at least an effort. He never even tried. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Not how it was supposed to be used. How he failed to address it, and what's worse, how he never even made an attempt to address it.
I saw today Hillary Clinton said that the supply side mentality, the supply side model should hit the trash heap of history. And, you look at what this governor's done over the last 4 years. It's in the same line. We're going to give big corporations and the wealthy all that they can have, more tax breaks, more sweeteners, all of that stuff, in the hopes that maybe possibly they'll create jobs. And it just hasn't worked. I mean, I don't know anywhere where it's actually worked. It's been one of these things that has led us in this massive race to the bottom, where we, the working class, we end up being the ones who pay the freight for the 1%, the 2% at the top. I have a serious problem with that. And one of the things I like about Wolf is I'm hoping that ends.
I believe it has to. I agree with you. Supply side needs to be thrown into the slag heap. It's snake oil, and the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and over again. These guys are like the walkers. They just keep moving forward with the same ideas and the same issues. They've continued to fail. They try to play shell games, create diversions, have the voters chase red herrings and look away from their failed policies. And they hope to sneak back in, run it for a couple cycles, help make their corporate friends wealthy before folks realize what they've done and vote them out. Well, we put a stop to that. I mean, we went 5-0 in 2012 in Pennsylvania. We went 5-0 statewide because we were able to call them out on their bluffs and their disingenuous proposals. We're doing it again now.
Good.
But you're right, Rick. You're absolutely right. They keep coming. They call it something else, or they repackage it. But it's still more of the same. It's never anything new. Fortunately for all of us, Pennsylvanians are very in tune with that right now. But at the end, like you and I have talked about, it's something that we can't take for granted. We can't say that we have this in the bag. If you're really needing to make this change and you believe what we have said and you are correct in doing so, you've got to get out and you've got to bring your friends and your family and you've got to vote for Tom Wolf.
Yeah, we're just a little over a week away from the big day, November 4th, and I hope everyone's got it circled on their calendar, on their phones, whatever. Big alarm saying, "Hey, get out to vote," because at the end of the day, the polls may say that Wolf's up by 10 or 15. I think 17 is the last I saw.
It's big. It's big.
You got to get out and cast the ballot.
Yeah, I mean the polls mean absolutely nothing if you're sitting at home, reading about them or watching them on television. That poll can change real fast.
Let me ask you this, Jim.
Nothing.
Let me ask you this. The polling is pretty good, and I'm hoping people get out, and I'm hoping Wolf is the next governor. Where do you see the rest of the state going? There's some who are worried, and I'm one of them, that you have a Governor Wolf with a large majority of Republicans controlling the House and the Senate, and then we end up with 2 more years at least of gridlock.
I don't know that there will be gridlock. I really do believe. I mean, watching the dynamic in the Republican-controlled chambers, you read between the lines, and sometimes you just read it outright. There's a sense of frustration in those chambers in the Republican majorities. They want to get things done too.
Yeah.
They never had a partner in this governor, and I believe, and they're being loyal to their party, and I understand they're doing that, for a variety of reasons. But I think, and I'm not going to speak for them; they can do that for themselves. I think they're looking for cooperation. I think they're looking for bipartisanship. And this is a governor candidate who hopefully in about 10 more days will be the governor-elect, who has said quite clearly and unequivocally, I will have face-to-face conversations with anyone who wants to work with all of us collectively to make this work.
Yeah.
And I don't think he looks at their party registration. He's gonna practically seek out members of both chambers and both parties and build consensus. And that's going to be refreshing for all of us. And so I don't think it's going to be the gridlock we've seen. This is a Republican governor who had gridlock in Republican-controlled chambers.
Yeah, that's
can't get any worse than that.
That's the thing that always surprised me. They've had steamroller control and have really nothing to show for it other than Act 13 that would have taken local control away, even though they're the party of get government out of my life, and also the voter suppression thing that got shot down as unconstitutional. Those are their accomplishments.
It was hypocrisy all across the board. I mean, they really got their hand in the cookie jar of inconsistency on the Act 13. Less government than they were asking for more. And the voter ID, of course, less government asking for more for reasons, fraud and things of that nature, reasons that never existed in the first place. That's the art of how they were able to succeed, divide and conquer. make up a diversion, get people to be concerned, and then ride in on your white horse. Well, we caught them on both.
And that's a good thing. And I'm looking forward to November 4th. I'm looking forward to a change. And I hope you're right, because I got to be honest, if I were in Washington, for instance, where Congress is at an all-time low approval rating, in fact, herpes has a much higher approval rating than Congress right now, I think I would want to do something to at least improve my image above cockroaches and herpes. Just my thought.
There's nowhere to go but up in Pennsylvania. The governor, he's the most unpopular governor in America. He earned that.
Yep.
He earned that by failing to lead. His own party has walked away from him. I've been to 67 counties. You know that. When I go to events in the middle of the state in the T, and I see Republicans at Democratic events asking for Tom Wolf signs, the Republican governor has a problem. The end game now is don't take it for granted. Don't just look at the polls and think that you can stay home. You cannot stay home. In addition to yourself and those you've already called, call them again, and then call folks outside of that circle. This will not be over until 8:01 p.m. on November 4th. And I would suggest that in the next 10 days, Mr. Corbett and the Koch brothers are going to engage in some real nefarious campaign activity. We must be prepared for that, and we must stay ahead of this, keep our foot on the pedal, do not let up. We have 10 days. As hard as people like you and I and others have worked since 2011, dig deep, crank it out, work exponentially harder, leave nothing behind. It all must be out there by the end of this cycle.
There you go. Jim, I appreciate you taking time for us. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Jim Byrne, chairman of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Turn out for what? Turn out for what?
I'm Darren, and I'm turning out for education. I'm EJ, and I'm turning out for marriage equality.
My name is Lil Lena, and I'm turning out for reproductive rights.
Turn out for what?
On June 25th, 1938, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act into law. Viewed as one of the final pieces of legislation of FDR's New Deal and the single most worker-friendly piece of legislation ever written, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 was a victory not only for labor unions, but for workers, families, and children across the country. FDR called the new law the most far-reaching, far-sighted program for the benefit of workers ever adopted in this or any other country. This visionary piece of legislation put a ceiling over hours and a floor under wages, mandating a 44-hour week, a 25-cent minimum wage, and time and a half for overtime. The Fair Labor Standards Act was later amended to 40 hours per week and 40 cents per hour. The law also excluded children from working dangerous jobs and set standard conditions for the employment of child workers to avoid continued exploitation of children. The Fair Labor Standards Act has been changed or amended at least 43 different times. These alterations have been used both to expand worker protections, such as raising the minimum wage, prohibiting age discrimination, and requiring equal pay, and to restrict and take away protections such as the Taft-Hartley Act and the 2000 pay amendment. Today, we take the 40-hour work week, minimum wages, overtime, and child labor protections for granted. But up until the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, workers were at the mercy of their employers and children were dying in industrial accidents. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves. We want the airwaves. That's right. We want the airwaves, baby. If I can stay alive. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com, and get the app. Get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Just check your smartphone, the Google Play, iTunes, all right there. I'm here talking with folks from AFSCME Council 13 about why this election is so important. What what it is we need to be focusing on and the issues that are important to them. And I'm sitting here with Joyce Culpepper. She's a retiree of AFSCME Council 13. Joyce, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome, Rick.
So, you look at this election cycle and, as we've been talking to people here, we keep hearing this come over. This is an extremely important election, one of the most important in our lifetime. And I guess every election's important. And I guess you could make the argument the most important ever, huh?
Yes, it is. We have been under 4 years of the attack from Governor Corbett as working people, and especially unions. And we need to keep unions going, because if it wasn't for the union, we wouldn't have the fair wages, benefits, and a good quality of life that we have now.
Yeah, and I don't think enough people hear those stories. I go back and I talk about myself quite often. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. And in my neighborhood, there were only 3 ways of getting out of the neighborhood. They carried you out in a body bag. You were really good at sports, or you got a union card and got one of the union jobs that were a couple miles away. That was it. And, I think those stories need to be told more often, because the attacks on unions in Pennsylvania, but across the country, have been almost nonstop.
Yes, they have. And I don't know why they're attacking good union workers.
I do. The last people who are willing to stand up and say no.
Yes.
The only people who can speak truth to power, the only people who can look at the Koch brothers and say, we want to sit down and negotiate.
Yes, that's true. And we've been under attack for a long time. It just didn't start with this governor's race. We've been under attack for a while, but it's coming out and it's more nationally known outside of Pennsylvania, other states as well, where people are under attack. Look at Michigan, Ohio, just to name a few. And there's other states out there that are under attack to take away union workers' rights. And we need to keep those rights going. Union members earn a better wage because of the union contract that's negotiated for them. Also, our retirement pensions are under attack as well under the corporate administration. I feel that soon-to-be Governor Tom Wolf will protect those rights for us. He seems to be for the working class people and not for corporate greed or corporate how can I put it?
Control, dominance,
yes,
all of that.
Yes.
And in my conversations with Tom Wolf, and I'm with you, I'm hoping he will become governor here in just over a week, November 4th. Mark it on the calendar. We got to get people out to vote. But in my conversations with him, he's of the mindset, look, if you have a middle class that's growing, you're also going to have a wealth class that is growing. The old Kennedy statement of, a rising tide lifts all boats. The problem is we've got a rising tide right now that's capsizing the lifeboats that we're in. And
Yes.
and hopefully what we'll see in the next governor will be a change of that.
Yes, and I hope that people understand that getting out to vote, first of all, hopefully they're registered, everyone, regardless of your party, but it is a right that we have as Americans in the United States. You see what's happening in these countries over in the Middle East and all these other countries, Turkey, they want democracy, which we already have. But when you look at our voting records, people just do not get out to vote. And that's one thing we have here in America is the right to vote. And it doesn't cost you anything, but just to sign that registration card, get out to vote on election day, which is what we need to do.
Do you think the reason that people don't vote is that it's just become so divisive and so much mudslinging and so much, vitriol and almost hatred, if you will, that some people just throw up their hands and go, they're all crooks, and just walk away?
I think mudslinging is one of the bad portions of these election ads that are on television and in the radio. But most of all, I feel that people feel even if I vote, it doesn't matter, but it does matter. And these midterm elections are the most important elections.
They're the ones that affect us the most.
Right.
Absolutely.
We're the ones that they're going to raise anything against the working class, whether it's taking away benefits, taking away a certain right that you had years ago. These senators and legislators are the ones that's going to control that. But we're the ones that have a voice to talk against that and say no and write letters and let them know you're not happy with what's going on out there and what they're trying to take away from you. It's our God-given right to stand up and say, we're not going to take this. We have a right to vote and we want to use it fairly and get out there to vote on election day. Because if we can't do that, then we have no voice, we have no power. And we need to let our neighbors, our family members, anybody in the grocery store know that it's your voting rights, it's your responsibility to vote, to get that right person in office, because when they get in and they start taking away from you, you never get that back.
Right. As a retiree, Joyce, and I'm not sure what you did during your years, but as an AFSCME member and a retiree, I'm assuming you were a public sector worker. How do you feel about, when you see these attacks that have been prevalent the last couple of years against public sector workers, and especially, those of you public sector workers who destroyed the economy in 2008 and caused this collapse because you wanted a reasonable wage and a pension? Why'd you do that?
Well, I don't think it was public sector workers at all. I think it was the top 1% that thought that that's what we wanted to do.
We're greedy, good for nuts down on Wall Street. They're the ones who did it.
Yes, definitely.
But the frame we keep hearing is it's because you have pensions and because you have representation and a voice and all of that. That's the frame we hear. And I'm curious how that makes you feel.
Well, as a Commonwealth employee, when I retired, I had 40 years and 10 months. And technically, I wanted to work until I reached Social Security age or even longer. But then when they started talking about the pension issue, I started getting scared. I'm like, I have 40 years in, what do I do? I mean, it could impact me. I'm putting my money in here. I don't know what's going to happen. So as far as attacking union and public service workers, or even if they're non-state and they're doing work for a nursing home, you cannot mess with their pension. People have paid into their pensions. The Commonwealth has given you nothing, more or less. I paid into my pension for 40 years and 10 months. So I earned that money. For them to come along and say, oh, now we're going to change it up and put you in the 401k, and everybody knows how the economy is. It's volatile. 1 minute it could be up, next minute it could be down. You could be losing money in a 401k. So I don't understand the purpose of that. Having a defined benefit is a lot better and it's more secure for the working people out there.
But as the guy, one of the hearings I sat in on, as the guy who asked Dr. Stephen Herzenberg why the private sector had gone to a defined contribution over a defined benefit, and Steve, to his credit, very, very quickly said, because they don't have to fund it. And they don't. And that's what this is really all about. This is about cheating workers out of their pension. And it doesn't get any simpler than that.
Yes, exactly.
And this has all caused this whole created manufactured crisis is because the state didn't put money as they were supposed to into the pension fund to fund it. And also the huge collapse during the Bush years caused a big part of this. So let me ask you, Joyce, as a retiree and as a grandmother, when you look at the last 4 years, can you imagine another 4?
No, I can't. I really can. I came through a lot of the governor administrators down through all them years from 1972 to 2013. And
so you've seen a lot of them.
Yes. And I thought under the Thornburg administration, it was bad, but it's worse than that.
This is the worst one
Yes, yet? Yes. And we need a governor in there that's going to be for the people of Pennsylvania, not only the Commonwealth, but all the people in Pennsylvania. And that's who they need to look at when they go to that poll on Tuesday, November 4th, and decide and say, which of the better of these shall I choose? And they need to look at that and think about, just go out there and see what they've done. Another thing is that I live in a joint school district, and one town wants to pull their children out of the school district, and they're blaming the school directors for higher taxes. So I wrote out on Facebook that it wasn't the school director's fault.
Nope.
That $1 billion was taken away out of education fund to put into the gas drilling. And when you take money out of education, that is a snowball effect. And it's going to affect not only the children, the school district, and the taxpayers. So they feel, oh, we're going to move to another district. This is going to help us with our taxes. It's not going to happen because of everything that has trickled down through that budget cut.
So you're saying that Tom Corbett broke his Grover Northwest pledge. He's actually raised taxes. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. Yes.
I'm with
yes.
you.
Yes.
Absolutely believe it as
Yes.
well. Even though it wasn't by his pen, it was by his doing. So November 4th, you're going to get out the vote, and I assume Wolf's your guy, huh?
Yes, and I'm going to vote as if my life depends on it because it does.
Because your grandchildren's future
Yes,
depend
and my
on it as
granddaughter.
well.
Yes, yes.
Joyce Culpepper, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people.
Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
It's bad enough that the Goliaths of big beer are consuming each other in a new round of mega mergers, meaning fewer choices and higher prices for consumers. But the really bad news is that they're also going after the one bright spot on tap in bars all across the country: craft beers. These are not merely beers, but jewels of the brewer's art. Yeasty, hoppy, and malty, local delights with unique, deep flavors that put the fizzy yellow suds of Budweiser, Miller, and Coors to shame. And, not surprisingly, while the sales of big beer's fizz are declining, the craft brewers are up by 17% last year alone, and the number of craft brewers has nearly doubled since 2010. The giants have noticed, and they're responding. By making better beer? Don't be silly. Instead, they're trying to co-opt the good name of local beer makers and dupe consumers by pretending that the likes of Bud and Miller are craft brewers too. How? Two ways. First, they've created false fronts like Blue Moon Brewing Company, 10th and Blake, and Green Valley Brewery, pretending to be upstart independents. You won't see the name of Miller Coors or Anheuser-Busch on the labels, but those are the macro brewers that own and make such ersatz macro brews as Blue Moon, Killian's, and Shock Top. Second, the deep-pocketed beer behemoths are simply buying up small craft brewers, including Goose Island by Anheuser-Busch and Leinenkugel by Miller Coors. Again, they're co-opting the imagery of cool independence, but shh, it's the same old big beer hiding behind the small guys' labels. This is Jim Hightower saying, when all else fails, the giants get thuggish, using their marketing muscle and political punch to knock the craft beers out of bars and off the shelves. But the independents are scrappy, and it's up to us quaffers of real beer to stand up and drink with them.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Testify. I hear a lot of people testifying about why the last 4 years have been really bad and how they're not better off than we were 4 years ago. I hear a lot of that. And you know, this is what happens when you don't have a record of accomplishment. When the only thing that you have in 4 years of being governor of one of the biggest states in the country is that you took the country from 10th in job creation to dead last. And maybe once Governor Corbett is out of Pennsylvania, because I know he's got the house down in South Carolina, so good place to go. Maybe when he's done being governor here. After all, last. That's the record. Took us from 10th to dead last. Maybe he could go work on the national scene, try and help the national economy as he has helped the Pennsylvania economy. Because here's the thing. According to the one news article I read, Pennsylvania's the United States' wage floor as a percentage of median wage was third lowest among the 34 OECD countries, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, to what Thomas Perez, the Department of Labor Secretary, said, quote, and very bluntly, I mean, we suck. We really do. We suck. We're 31st out of 34, which means if Corbett took over, we could be 34th. And I guess, if you can't be number one, you might as well be number one from the bottom. So we've got a little work to do. We're third. And the whole argument here is this is why we don't need to raise the minimum wage. And if your goal is to make sure that you have complete and total inequality, where the bottom of the economic scale is like the worst in the world, continue on the path that we've been on. Here's the thing that gets me, though. You look at this minimum wage talk, and there's a lot of this going on. There are a lot of people going, hey, maybe possibly we should consider raising the minimum wage. Since, within the quote unquote first world countries, we're one of the worst in the world at having this wage floor. What's interesting to me is the Republicans, they want to turn that around and go, well, there should be more jobs. And I go, I agree. Where's your plan for more jobs? Oh yeah, more of the same bad things, same dumb ideas that got us to last here in Pennsylvania. Yeah, that's great. Let's do more of that. Let's see where that gets us. And where it gets us is, well, last. And I got to ask you, how many people are frustrated with it? I got to be honest, I am. I'm a bit frustrated by the last. Because there are so many things, I didn't grow up in Pennsylvania, but I love this state. And there are so many opportunities here. When Tom Corbett says we're a day's drive to 60, 65, I've heard 70% of the population of the country. This would be a natural place for manufacturing. And even that didn't draw jobs. You know why? Because we've got the worst infrastructure in the country. Ask anybody who drives a truck for a living. They will tell you Indiana's catching up. That Indiana toll road is horrible. But most truck drivers avoid that anyway because the tolls are too high. But the roads here are just horrible. And it comes down to, years of non-investment, years of doing nothing. And I'm hoping that that with a new governor, with new ideas and new vision, some of that changes. Because I've talked to people who their job is locating businesses from place to place, searching out places. It's not the tax code they're looking at. They're looking at infrastructure. They're looking at, can we get our products to market? It's education. Do we have an educated workforce that can step in and do the jobs that we need to do? And is it, location. Those are the top 5 things: location, education, infrastructure. And this governor has done everything he can do to muck up all of that. Just very, very strange to me. And I really am hoping come November 4th, people do get out the vote and pull the lever and different direction, because you can't be happy with what's happened over the last 4 years of total Republican steamroller control. I mean, that's the part that gets me. Absolute control, absolute power. The Democrats could have stayed home. They didn't even have to come to work because they had no say. So if you're not happy with what's going on, I can tell you who's the fault. That's right. It would be the Corbett and the GOP. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A union born in the South is having success organizing Southern workers. Thousands of mechanics, technicians, and maintenance personnel employed by URS at the Red River Army Depot near Texarkana, Texas, just became machinist union members. That's according to Bob Wood of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers.
People are today are much more interested in unions, and they're ready to unionize, and they're ready in the South to unionize.
Wood says 925 workers at Corpus Christi Army Depot joined the union earlier this year, and there are hundreds of others at other Southern work sites that are expected to join. Wood says the South is changing, and unions are working hard with strategies to sign up more Southern workers.
This is just the beginning. We have put together a strategic plan, and we have people coming to us and wanting unions, and we've got the organizers, and we have good contracts. We have good outcomes. We have a very strong union, and union that stands up for its members, and that's the secret to success.
Graduate student employees at Yale University are hopeful that Yale will soon begin talking with them about recognizing their union and bargaining a contract. Aaron Greenberg is chair of Yale's Graduate Employees and Students Organization.
We have made clear both in the spring and then just a few days ago exactly what we're looking for. 60 miles to the north, 60 miles to the south, two universities found a way to enter into a dialogue and to negotiate with graduate employees about these issues. We hope that that happens imminently here and that we have a chance to sit down with our administration and talk about the reasons why we want to negotiate the kind of contract that we want, the kind of election that we want, and that we actually have a chance to talk with them.
Greenberg says there's a wave of academic worker organizing happening around the U.S.
It's a really exciting time for organizing academics across the country, not just in the Northeast. And the wave of organization is one that we're riding. It's one that's gotten our members very excited. And we think it's one that will ultimately allow us to succeed in sitting down with the university and actually talking about so many of the issues around our wages, around our benefits, a grievance procedure, and around really having a voice in the university as it grows.
The Indonesian Supreme Court has upheld a lower court ruling there convicting a former boss of prohibiting formation of a labor union. The court said it violates Article 28 of Indonesia's labor unions law. Hutomo Haidiat was convicted of blocking the workers from organizing at a furniture company. He fired 107 workers to bust the union organizing effort. He was sentenced to a year in prison, but East Java's High Court increased that sentence to 18 months, and the Supreme Court upheld the sentence. The criminal boss, though, has apparently fled the country rather than do his time for violating the labor law. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Standing up to conservatives and corporate every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm an innocent bystander. Somehow I got stuck between the rock and the hard place, and I'm down on my luck. Send lawyers, guns, and money.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Last night, AFSCME Council 13 had an interesting training where they brought people in, because the election is, just a little over a week away. November 4th, make sure it's on the calendar. Make sure big red circle that we get out and vote. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk to some of the people who were working on the campaign, some of the folks who were involved in the goings-on with AFSCME and some of the other unions. And I'm sitting here with Jim Fogel. He's with AFGE 1156 here in the area. Jim, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you.
You look at this election, and I guess every election cycle, you get people saying, this is the most important election in the history of ever. This kind of is.
Yes, it is, because over the last 4 years, we have seen a drastic change in the state of Pennsylvania, especially in the area of education. I have grandkids that used to take the bus to school. Now, because of the cuts in education, they have to walk over a mile, sometimes 2 miles to get to school. And some of the areas that they have to walk through, I fear for their safety. So
yeah, I hear that story so often. I mean, especially when you look at the Philadelphia school district and what they've done there. But it's just not Philadelphia, is it?
No, it's all over.
These cuts have been draconian and drastic and harmful, and it's not just Philly; it's all across our Commonwealth.
Yes. And I think it's a concerted effort to make charter schools look good. I tell people all the time, if you want something to look bad, you set it up to look bad. You say the public school system is bad, so you cut funding, and you basically set them up for failure.
Yeah.
And then you highlight charter school as the answer, and you hear people all the time say charter school is the way to go. But I tell people, do your homework. Look at some of the areas where charter schools exist.
But here's the thing with the charter schools: the studies are almost all in.
Right.
They do no better than the public schools.
The rate of graduation is still the same.
Yep.
And
it comes down to the funding. Yesterday, I talked about the funding mechanism, and Alan Butzkowitz, the city controller in Philadelphia, said that when he released his report that the city schools in Philadelphia saw a $70 million deficit last year, but the charter schools saw a $117 million surplus. And I want to know where that $117 million went. Did it go into the pockets of the privateers? Why didn't it go to education? And I blame Governor Corbett for it.
Oh yes, I blame Corbett for a lot of things. I believe, and it's tied to politician and where they get their support from.
Comes down to the money, doesn't it?
Right. You support a candidate. That candidate get in office, they basically owe you. So whatever they want, they choose. They look at you and say, "Hey, I support charter school. We want you to support charter school." And I think Corbett basically went down that road of charter schools and cutting funding for education. But like I said earlier, there's no reason why any kid should have to walk 2 miles to school, especially when they're only in the 3rd grade.
Yeah. But we hear the right-wing argument. Well, when I was a kid, you've heard it.
Right.
I walked uphill 17 miles both ways.
Yeah, but did you walk through drug-infested areas? Did you go to a corner, crossing guard?
Yeah.
And you basically people rushing to get to work. How many kids have? I know my grandson said he almost got hit the other day.
And that's just
no
around
crossing guard.
And the thing is, that's just around the corner from the governor's mansion.
Right.
The governor should be out there crossing the kids.
Right.
If he's going to cut the funding, we should put him out there at least doing something useful.
Right. You shutting down schools. You shutting down neighborhood schools. And this is after we spent in the last administration. I don't know how many millions they spent upgrading the schools, made them functional.
Well, that was
high
the scheme.
tech.
The scheme was on the public dime, we'll fix them up, and then we'll lease them out for virtually nothing to the profiteers.
Right. Now
and the taxpayer gets stuck holding the bag.
Now you got these beautiful empty schools, and the kids are walking by them to a school that's 2 miles away, overcrowded, not enough teachers. So this is why voting is important. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, my vote don't count," and I tell them, you take 1 million people, and if 1 million people say what you just said, that you have 1 million people that don't vote.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Just the other day, Governor Christie from New Jersey and the chairman of the Republican Governors Association was giving a speech to the Chamber of Commerce. And he asked the question, do you want Rick Scott or Charlie Crist in charge of the voting mechanism in Florida? Do you want Scott Walker or Mary Burke in charge of the voting mechanism in Wisconsin? And Ohio, do you want John Kasich or Ed Fitzgerald in charge of the voting mechanism? And I'm going, no, I don't want anybody in charge of my voting mechanism. I want the people in charge. But their mindset is, like Governor Corbett said, as candidate Corbett, if I can hold the vote down in Philadelphia, I'll be okay. Because to them, it's about suppressing the vote.
Right.
And you go back and you look at this governor's tenure, what was one of the main quote unquote accomplishments? Voter suppression, that voter ID law.
Right. And to me, the vote is the last thing we have. That should be pressured. So the vote should be like water. We need it. We should have it. There shouldn't be all kinds of rules set up or fences built that you have to jump over to vote.
Yeah,
You know,
I've
been
it's that
voting
fundamental building block of this experiment of self-governance.
Right, and being a minority, and I know what my ancestors went through just to gain the right, to have the right to vote. I think every minority should be out there voting just based on that alone. You know, we fought for the right to vote. You know, it's not a matter of it's a choice. No, it's a necessity. You have to vote. If you don't vote, then don't complain.
You know, and that's all right, but you know, it's also your civic responsibility,
Right?
And if we're going to have a functional democracy, if we're going to have this experiment, this amazing experiment that's been handed down to us of self-governance, we've got to participate and got to be active and engaged, and also educated. And the sad reality is so many people I talk to, they have this mentality of politics that it's team sport. It's just like, you know, watching the two teams on Sunday play in the NFL, and it's not. There are very real consequences, education being one of them, privatization being another one. You see all of this outsourcing to these profiteers, and we never seem to get our money's worth out of it.
Right, and I say to people during the election cycle, treat these commercials like just entertainment.
That's what they are.
You know, they're just entertainment. Corbett's been in office for how many years? If you don't know what he has done, you're never gonna know. You know, you can bring on these commercials and say the other guys do not is going to take this away, take that away. Just think about something. I was watching the debate, and Wolf came back with a very good comment. He was listening to Corbett, and I don't know if people picked up on it. He said to Corbett, because Corbett was talking about what he planned on doing, and Wolf just in a nice way said, "But you've been there. You're there now." Anything so far. So how are we to believe you?
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at the priorities that he's gone after. The Corbett priorities of the first term were to kick 41,000 low-wage workers off of adult basic, almost 90,000 children off of CHIP, to throw 70,000 of the most vulnerable off of the general assistance budget, to try and suppress minorities, seniors, college students, and poor people from the access to the ballot. We can go take away local control through Act 13, not tax the drillers. We can go on for days.
And I think we're missing one thing. It just came to mind: the closing of the state hospital. Where do those people go?
Yeah, but if I remember right, that happened under Rendell, right?
I'm not too sure. I may be mistaken on that, because I've been working with the homeless shelters, and these people are out in the streets trying to.
But we've done nothing to help them.
Right.
And the reason I brought up the general assistance budget, you're talking about 70,000 of the most vulnerable. This is that last lifeline that these folks were getting. It was like $200 a month, and he just zipped it right away.
Right, just like I work with the work release prisoners who's trying to get their life together, and when they talk to me, they basically said, "Hey, the deck is stacked against me." You know, I get up in the morning, I have to pay $8 to take a van across the river to a warehouse. I have to stand in line and hope to get selected. If I don't get selected, I have to go outside and wait for 4 hours for that van to come, pay that guy and another $8 to go back to the center. And this is a day-to-day routine. And a lot of them say, you know what? I know what I was doing before was wrong, but it's a lot better than what I'm doing now. So there's all kinds of issues out there that we could be addressing, and we should be addressing. That's one of them.
That any civil society would address.
You're right. You know, you got these warehouses out there that basically choose who they want to work for today, and usually the person choosing tend to choose the person of their own race.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
You know.
So let's bring this back to this election. I know you're doing an awful lot of work trying to get people out to vote, and obviously, I from our conversation, I'm assuming you're a Wolf supporter. What are you finding other people out on the trail talking about? What the people that you're knocking on doors and talking to on the phone? What are they saying?
They're tired of Corbett. I think one of the thing that they hang their hat on is when he wanted to contract out the lottery, and the fact that not that he wanted to contract it out, but it was to an overseas firm.
Yeah.
And nobody couldn't figure out for what reason. and that's when things really start turning in a negative way for him. Not just education. Education was a big one, but just contracting out, and then you went after the
He's
state
gone after the state
stores.
stores the whole term.
Yeah, state stores. And
So let me ask you this. I mean, we've talked about why not Corbett, but why Wolf?
we need a breath of fresh air. And sometimes I think what Wolf is saying is it resonates,
Right.
a fair tax system. Start taxing these corporations.
Going after the drillers.
Right. You have the corporation coming in here
Yeah.
working free of charge. And they sell us on this idea that they're going to create jobs. They do create jobs. They create jobs for the workers they bring in from Texas. Those 10-hour workers, do the job. Once they're done, they go back. They take their money back to Texas.
Yeah.
So
We've created a transient workforce.
right,
Yeah.
right. So Wolf is, Corbett had his chance.
Time for a change.
It's time for a change.
That's a good word. That's a good place
Wolf
to
is a
leave it.
breath of fresh air.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you
Thank
taking
you.
time for us. Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And hear your sister's voice calling us home across the open yards. Or maybe we could cut someplace of our own with these drums and these guitars. 'Cause we made a promise, we swore we'd always remember. No retreat, baby, no surrender. Brothers in the stormy night with a vow to defend. No retreat, baby, no surrender.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Let's go to Manhattan District Court. In a rare occurrence, the UN is being sued by victims of the 2010 cholera outbreak in Haiti. Many of those victims, and an increasing roster of scientists and human rights lawyers, say a contingent of UN peacekeepers from Nepal introduced the disease to the earthquake-ravaged island. They contend the UN was negligent in deploying peacekeepers from a country experiencing a cholera outbreak of its own, and for building inadequate sanitation facilities in Haiti, where raw sewage from the peacekeepers entered the country's primary water source. Over 700,000 cholera infections have been recorded since 2010, along with more than 8,000 deaths. The UN contends it's immune from prosecution, but today one lawsuit got its day in court, with American and Haitian lawyers arguing on behalf of 5 victims and their families that the UN should be forced to account for its actions.
This case is about whether the United Nations can essentially operate with impunity when it has refused to provide any kind of remedies to the victims.
Beatrice Lindstrom is an attorney with the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, and she represented the plaintiffs in court today.
The United Nations stands for the promotion of human rights for all nations. And so we ask the Secretary General to listen to Haitians when they ask for justice in this case.
The UN often cites that it's poured money into the fight to contain cholera, but when pressed to respond to victims, the organization's spokespeople and officials are either evasive or adamant they did no wrong. Here was spokesman Farhan Haq this afternoon.
The United Nations has maintained its immunity from legal process in respect of this lawsuit. In light of this, the United Nations will not appear in court.
When the U.S. District Court decides whether or not the suit against the UN can go forward, you'll hear about it here. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the lessons learned from it that changed our cities. The most thorough analysis of the fire came from Frederick Law Olmsted, a renowned landscape architect. Olmsted's analysis gave rise to significant changes in safety and building development. And credit goes also to Chicago civic and political leaders who took Olmsted's review and the recommendations of others and turned Chicago into a great American city that led the way for many other cities in the United States. Their leadership helped establish the country's first substantive fire codes. They also established a fire department full of well-trained and well-equipped firefighters. Finally, the most visible improvements came in the form of new skyscrapers of brick, stone, and mortar. that became the nation's first beautiful skyline. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Everybody, let's get into it. Get stoked, get it started, get it started, get it started. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Yeah. Lose control of body. So, don't move too fast, people just take it slow.
I'll just ask you what it's like to be and how you feel about the attacks on public sector workers in general. Just kind of a feel piece. But, it hurts. I spend my life working for being a public servant, and this is the thanks I get. Does that make? Yeah. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Spending a little time with the good folks, AFSCME Council 13. Talking about the issues that, this election is an extremely important election, as all are. But this one for labor folks, particularly important because the last 4 years have just been attack after attack on working people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm sitting here with Helen Elliott. She's the head of the Coalition for Labor Women here in Pennsylvania. Also works for the Department of Labor here in Pennsylvania. Helen, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick.
I appreciate you sitting down with me and sharing a little bit of your experience. I know a bunch of people who work for the Commonwealth and do really outstanding work. And the first question I always ask them is, well, how do you feel about, the attacks that we've seen that, government can do nothing right. And, the private sector is the only place where things can get done. I'm curious, as someone who's dedicated a good portion of your life to this, how does that make you feel?
It makes you feel like you've worked your life for nothing, because as a Commonwealth employee, I realize that what I do is a service. I am a public servant, so I'm serving the public. The right often cows that it could be done quicker, easier, cheaper by the private sector. The private sector is going to make money on what I do as a Commonwealth employee.
I was in Wisconsin, February 2011, when the occupation was going on, when you had 100,000 people in the streets. And I had gone behind the Capitol because we slept on the granite floor in the Capitol for 9 days as all that was going on. I went to have my oil change, and there was a guy in front of me in line. He was a state worker. He was retiring. And he was telling the guy behind the counter he was retiring and he was going to do the exact same job for a private contractor and get paid twice as much while still being able to collect his pension. And he was thrilled. I'm going to do my same job, twice as much money, get my pension. The guy behind the counter was infuriated that the guy was getting a pension.
But in Pennsylvania, I pay into my pension.
Right.
It's not free.
No. And this guy didn't think it was free either. He was just mad that the guy got a pension, not that it was going to cost twice as much for him to do the exact same job he was doing as a public sector worker.
But I think people should be mad that they're not getting a pension. Everybody, that should be the law, that everybody gets a pension. If you put your time in and you pay into the system, you should be able to retire and live the life that you've worked for 35 years. You should live at that same level and not have to worry about getting a part-time job to sustain yourself on Social Security. Social Security was meant as a not your total income. It was to subsidize. And in order to subsidize your retirement, you need a retirement.
Yes. It was part of the three-legged stool.
Right. And being in the 401k, trust me, you don't know. I could not manage my money. I don't know if that sounds bad or whatever,
None
but
of
I
us can.
couldn't. I couldn't, and I don't trust 401ks. I think most of the money or too much of the money goes to somebody making a profit on my money, the fees. The fees are the things with the 401ks that gets me. Everybody gets a fee and I get what's left if the stock goes up.
Yeah.
If it goes down, I pay the fee and then I lose my money too. It's not right.
Yeah, it's and that's the whole reason that they want to privatize the pension system. That's the reason they're attempting to
Sure it
destroy
is.
it,
Sure
because
it
they
is.
want to get Wall Street in there.
Exactly.
For more than 100 years, you've had sirs and piecers doing a very
Great
good job.
Right.
But they want to say, look, it comes down to any con. If you can separate one of the sheep from the flock, they're much easier to peck off.
Right.
You can't get the whole flock. You get them one at a time.
Right.
And that's what this really is, in my opinion.
I think so too. I really do.
So when you look at this governor, and look, I know you can't talk politics, and we're not going to, but he ran around saying that he had a campaign pledge that he was going to cut public sector employment by more than ever, and he's now claiming, that employment in Pennsylvania is the lowest it's been in forever.
But what are services?
Exactly.
When you have to stand in line and wait longer, when you have to wait longer for every service, how is that a better deal? When employees are not there, people are doing 2 and 3 jobs because there's nobody to do it. You have to do more with less. How long is less going to, how can you continue to do that? You can't.
And there's part of me that thinks that's all part of the plan.
It is.
To say that government can't work. What they do is they defund it, and they muck up the system so that people get angry, and it's this self-fulfilling prophecy that you're on the phone for 2 hours and you got somebody who's overworked, who's on the other end, and they end up with this kind of an idea.
Right, but I think if you would look at the people who are working and doing the same job that they were doing, 20 years ago, with automation, it is there. You do need less people to do certain jobs, but not every job. There's some things you can't cut people out of.
Yeah, you need someone answering the damn phone.
And when you have in the private industry, somebody's making a profit on that.
Correct.
If you're gonna pay somebody to be profitable, why not pay your employees to do a good job?
See, you ought to run for office. I mean, honestly, gee, have we ever tried that? That's a novel thought. Maybe you could be on one of their campaign staffs.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look at this, I go, it's so simple to me. We should try it. Heaven knows it hasn't been tried.
Right.
So, as you look at, what's been going on the last couple of years, I'm assuming your job has gotten that much harder.
Right.
And I look at some of the things that have been done. I know you work with the Department of Labor. I go back to the unemployment bill that they passed a couple of years ago, which has just been devastating to working people. And you said earlier that you thought that maybe we should be extending those benefits instead of clawing them back. Because after all, did you know Pennsylvania is 50th in the nation in job creation?
I heard that today. It's really
or you could be optimistic. We're first from the bottom.
Right. It's horrible to think that a state as prosperous as ours, and I think Pennsylvania has a lot of good workers, and we could bring a lot of good jobs into the state, but we were promised that, and it just really didn't happen.
Yeah,
so
here we are.
Right. Here we are, still waiting on the jobs to come through, and the unemployment traditionally in Pennsylvania, we had lower unemployment, and I'm sorry, right now it's not going that way.
Yeah. And the other part of this, the unemployment rate's under 6%, but how many of those people were just thrown off of unemployment?
Right.
Because that number doesn't count all of the unemployed.
Right.
It just counts the people who are
in the labor market.
Right. And even that, to me, something wrong with the calculation.
Yeah.
But in looking at what's going on, and I know you're probably looking at retirement at some point in the near future, I look at all of this talk around the pension, and that's got to be something of some concern.
It's very disconcerting to me that I worked 35 years and I have to worry that 10 years from now, I'm not that old. So, 10 years from now, will there be anything? And I think about the steel workers who had good pensions, and all of a sudden, bam, it's gone because it's gone. What would I do? I'm a single person, I'm widowed, and here I am. I have a house, I have taxes that I have to pay. And believe me, I don't mind paying my taxes, my fair share, because it goes back to the economy to help build our state. But I need my pension. I need to be able to use the pension that I have, that I paid into. It wasn't free. I worked 35 years to be able to retire with a decent pension and good health benefits, because I could have gone somewhere else to work, but I worked at the state because 35 years ago, that's what you did. You went to the state, you were guaranteed, you knew that when it came time to retire, you'd have a great pension and you still have health care benefits.
Yeah, you may not have made a lot of money. You made a living, you didn't make a killing, but at least you knew at the end of it, you'd have some dignity and some respect in retirement.
Right.
And to me, that's important as well. So let me ask you the last question I've got for you. You look at the last couple of years of cut, and austerity and all of that. I have to assume that your job has gotten exponentially harder.
It's harder in that there just aren't enough people, because unfortunately where I work, all around me is they're techie, and everything's electronic, where we're still working on paper and we just don't have the people. There are,
or the technology, from what I understand. I know when the Auditor General took over, he wanted to spend, I think, a couple $1 million to upgrade their technology to move them into at least the 20th century. And I'm not sure if he got it. And I have a friend who works over at the Department of Treasury who wanted to do a webinar, and the company that was going to plug in said, your technology is so old, we can't tech into it.
I think a lot of times too at the Commonwealth, instead of putting their money into changing and upgrading their system with Commonwealth employees, they contract out to big corps like Deloitte and IBM, who take a 5-year contract and run it for 9 years with no penalty. If I bring somebody in my house to do a job and they tell me I contract them for a month to do this job, if they go over, I want something for that, but that's not how the government works.
Well, I mean, what you've got though are people who don't believe in government, and then they work to make sure that it doesn't work. For me, I think if you were to invest in the technology that's in there, invest in the employees, I think we would be much further down the road, and I think your jobs would be much easier.
Right, and keep up with it as you go along, instead of 20 years in using the same thing, and then everybody boom is ahead of you, and then you catch up.
Well, let me ask you this other part of this, though, because the mainstream argument to that would be, well, it's the union who's precluding the state from doing that. Any reality in that?
I don't believe so. I think union workers at the Commonwealth can do it better, smarter, and for less money than any private industry. And we take pride, union workers in the Commonwealth take pride in our work. Oftentimes, I find my coworkers saying my work, not the Commonwealth's work, it's my work. I'm pressing people as a union officer, always take your break, always take your lunch. And they're saying, but I got to get this work done. My work's not done. I have to get my work done. We do take pride in what we do, and because we're public servants and we know the importance of serving the public.
Yeah, well, does it drive you insane? I pay your salary. That would have to get on my nerves.
It really doesn't, because I throw right back at them. I pay my salary too. I pay my taxes, so I'm self-employed.
Wow, there you go. I like that one. Helen, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Sure, it's been great talking to you, Rick.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after. Working people. We're talking.
This is why we fight, why we violate. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
On June 25th, 1938, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act into law. Viewed as one of the final pieces of legislation of FDR's New Deal and the single most worker-friendly piece of legislation ever written, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 was a victory not only for labor unions, but for workers, families, and children across the country. FDR called the new law the most far-reaching, far-sighted program for the benefit of workers ever adopted in this or any other country. This visionary piece of legislation put a ceiling over hours and a floor under wages, mandating a 44-hour work week, a 25-cent minimum wage, and time and a half for overtime. The Fair Labor Standard Act was later amended to 40 hours per week and 40 cents per hour. The law also excluded children from working dangerous jobs and set standard conditions for the employment of child workers to avoid continued exploitation of children. The Fair Labor Standard Act has been changed or amended at least 43 different times. These alterations have been used both to expand worker protections, such as raising the minimum wage, prohibiting age discrimination, and requiring equal pay, and to restrict and take away protections such as the Taft-Hartley Act and the 2004 Fair Pay Amendment. Today, we take the 40-hour work week, minimum wages, overtime, and protections for granted. But up until the passage of the Fair Labor Standard Act, workers were at the mercy of their employers, dying in industrial accidents. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united for undivided, we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters, and are you and I are in. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets aligning, no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, yeah, I'm still stuck on the statistic I saw yesterday, and I was reading one of the articles about the Philadelphia School District and this funding formula that we still don't have, because no one in any rational way can explain to me how it is we fund education here in the Commonwealth, which is why I've been calling for a reasonable, rational, fair funding formula. But I'm stuck on this statistic I saw, or this number I saw, that the Philadelphia public schools, the traditional brick and mortar public schools, operated at about a $70 million deficit last year. Yet the charter schools saw a $117 million surplus, or positive gain, if you will, is how the article put it. And I had two questions. One, why is that money going to the charter schools when it could have been used for the traditional public schools if it wasn't needed? And two, did it go into the profiteers' pockets? That's the other thing. How much of the education money that we think we're spending is ending up in the pockets of Education Incorporated? And I look at what's going on in this district and understand this isn't just going to happen in Philadelphia. This is the Petri dish, as I've been saying. This is the litmus test. This is the first shot. It's coming across the Commonwealth and across the country. So the question is how do you fight back? So, we've been talking about for some time, the teachers and the administration battling heads, but not so much on what the students think, which is why I've asked Ruby Anderson. She is a Philadelphia public school student to come talk with us and get a different perspective. Ruby, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I look at this and we hear so much in the newspaper and in the media about the battle going on between the SRC, the Corbett-appointed School Reform Commission, and the teachers and all of that. But I don't know there's enough put on your perspective. This is your one opportunity to get an education. So I'm curious, how you and your fellow students feel about what's going on.
Yeah, it's really exhausting, I would say. I'm a senior in high school right now, and the 4 years I've been in high school have been some of the most conflicting years in Philly education. In 2011, we were given a doomsday budget in which everything was cut. Basically, there was no music, there was no art, there was no sports, there was no secretaries, there was no assistant principals, there were no lunchtime aides, there was no budget for supplies. So it feels like no one cares about you, because if the government government cared about you, if the system cared about us, they would give us money for toilet paper. You know, they would pay for our pencils, and it's really disheartening to feel like no one cares.
And, the thing that gets me, Ruby, is that, this is your one shot at this education and this distraction. I got to, as a parent, to hear you say that infuriates me because I worry what my kids are going to go through. And, going through high school is tough enough without having to worry about if your school is going to be open or if you're going to have books or if you're going to have an opportunity to learn something.
Yeah, it's hard, but the students in Philadelphia are very determined, and we know what's going on. We're standing up for our rights in education. So yeah.
So as one of the things I said from the beginning, especially what was going on down in the York City School District, is, there are a lot of people who say, well, we don't teach civics anymore. We don't teach government anymore in the schools. And I said, well, I'm not sure about that. But this is an excellent lesson in direct action and civic engagement, I would have to think.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would agree that there is definitely civics are missing from the school curriculum, and thankfully that's something that I've just been able to learn about, and my peers have been able to learn about just from talking with each other. But the model we use today sees students as output of labor, not citizens. Education is now seen as an investment in a monetary sense rather than an investment in like an intellectual sense. So civics is missing, and it's a gap we've had to make up ourselves.
It's interesting that you put it that way because, I've often said that, we're turning education into factory work. We're turning the profession of being a teacher and that craft into just stamping out little widgets or these things called students where we we open these empty vessels and pour information in, and somehow at the end, they're all going to be, little prototypes of each other without that individual attention, I think is so critical.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like exactly. They're just, now that everything is so test-based, now in Pennsylvania we got the Keystones, which are going to be mandatory to graduate, I think, starting with the class of 2016. So it just seems like they're systemically underfunding us and now holding us to these high-stakes tests, and at the same time not giving us chances to do well. And there's so many things wrong with standardized tests, but it's not fair for them to take away our funding and then hold us to these crazy standards.
Which is why I've opted my children out of these high stakes standardized tests. Just
and
to gather.
That's why my mom opted us out too.
Well, just to me, they're just to gather data for the sole purpose of destroying the school. Because at the end of it, if you look at No Child Left Behind and all that, 100% of the schools were supposed to pass these tests. 100% of the students. And I got to tell you, you go outside on a bright, beautiful blue sky day and say, "Hey, what color is the sky?" You're not going to get 100% of the people to agree it's blue, let alone pass a standardized test.
Yeah, exactly. I think Albert Einstein has a quote somewhere that says, like, if you spend a life judging a fish on its ability to walk, it'll think it's stupid, Like, it's ridiculous to hold everyone to the same standard because not everyone is the same.
Wow, that's beautiful. Now, I know you guys are doing an awful lot of organizing on the student level. In fact, I think it's 215 Student Union is I've been following you on Twitter, so that's what I've been paying attention to. So you've seen a bunch of people come together. Now, I understand the day after the SRC announced their ambush of the teachers, the students actually took to the streets.
Yeah, it was actually 2 days after they announced it on a Monday, and we were on strike on a Wednesday. The reason we did that is the teachers in Philly aren't allowed to go on strike, or else they'll lose their license to teach. So we think, as students, we believe that if you can't withhold your labor, then you're not free. So we're opposed to that, and we decided that, it's not fair for the SRC to impose these terms on PFT and then also not allow them to withhold their labor in response to it. So we went on strike in solidarity with the teachers.
Wow. You've almost made me hit the floor. To hear a high school student talk about being allowed to withhold your labor in a free society and solidarity, I got to tell you, there are almost tears in my eyes that there may be a future in this country. There may be a tomorrow.
Oh, thank you.
because, this is something that we're not, my generation was never told this stuff. We were always told to hooray for me and the hell with everybody else. So to hear
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's something I'm starting to see proliferate, but hopefully, there's change in the air, and I think people are understanding that collaboration and community is essential to survival, and not everything is about the individual, because without a group there would be no individual.
Wow, you should run for something and quick. Because here's the thing. I mean, one of the things that I've said to students I've talked to in the past is what's happening to these teachers today is going to affect you tomorrow, because you're going to be the teachers or the cops or the firefighters or the construction workers or whatever that's going to be in these situations, come a couple of years, just a very short time down the road. So what happens to them, you're basically saddling yourself with.
Yeah, exactly. The SRC and the powers that be seem to think that, there's this great separation between teachers and students. When they justify cutting teachers' salaries or canceling their benefits, they often do it using this mantra of it's where we put students first. But, students working environments are teachers' working environments are students' learning environments. The two aren't separate. When a teacher is in a classroom with 60-something kids, that's going to affect the kids, not just the teacher.
Wow, where are you going to college?
I don't know.
And what are you going to be studying? What are you going to be studying? I'm hoping political science will be in there somewhere, because you're fantastic. But
Thank you.
I look at this and part of me says this is a great opportunity for kids to come together and to make change in their community, because I think my generation and the generation before me have really mucked this country up pretty bad.
Yeah, well, with the rise of neoliberalism in the 80s, with Reaganomics, definitely messed up a lot of stuff for us.
What are they teaching you in this school? 18-year-old talking about neoliberalism?
I read a lot.
Wow, good for you. I have some hope for the future. So when you see these attacks that are going on in the school district, there've got to be a couple of solutions that you're coming up with. One, for me as an outsider going, I don't know what this SRC thing is, but it should go.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really big issue. The problem with the SRC is that it's undemocratic. It's not okay for a body to govern over the public and not be chosen by the public. We didn't pick these people. Most of them don't even have a background in education, so it doesn't seem to make sense that they should be in charge of education. Philadelphia is the only school district that doesn't have an elected school board. And, in the 15 or so years that the SRC has been with us, things have only gotten worse. So, yeah, I think one of the first things that needs to happen, and along with the fair funding formula and the returning of the $1 billion that have been cut to education, the SRC has definitely got to go.
So the $1 billion, obviously, by throwing that out there, there's got to be some blame put at Governor Corbett's door over all the crisis going on there in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, definitely. He is surely to blame. It doesn't make sense to take $1 billion out of education and then spend $800 million on prison expansion. And it doesn't make sense that in a state with such rich natural resources that fracking companies are allowed to destroy our environment and not pay anything to the people. That doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, though, if you look at it from a profit motive perspective. If you have a privatized prison system that is going to make a bunch of money off of kids failing off of Education Incorporated, it's a perfect in and out. You fail the kids with education and you run them right into the prisons. Perfect profit motive, for years and years from beginning to end.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make sense to me, but I have a conscience, so.
Oh, there you go. But here's the thing, and you seem very articulate, very intelligent. I'm told though that the Philadelphia school districts are failures. They're horrible, and public schools in general are failures and horrible. I'm not getting that here though.
Yeah, I think definitely I've been lucky to come through a family that was able to supplement my education in ways like my parents could afford to pay a tutor to make up the difference of what I wasn't getting in school. And that's absolutely not fair that because my parents have more resources, I should be afforded better opportunities. But yeah, I wouldn't say the children aren't failing in Philadelphia. We're being failed by the adults. I think it's really unfair to put the blame on the students or the people of Philadelphia because we're not the ones who cut $1 billion to our education.
Well, I got to tell you, the more I see of what's going on, I have faith in the future, and I hope that the organizing that's going on and the work that you're doing continues. Where do you see things going in the coming days, weeks, and months as your group of organized students continue on your path?
I'm not sure. Obviously the main things we're going to be focusing on still are getting the SRC removed, restoring the funding we've lost, advocating for a fair funding formula. I think right now the most immediate thing is undoing the action that the SRC took when they canceled PFT's contract and imposed terms on them. Right now there's a temporary, I'm not sure what the word is, but
injunction.
That action is injunction. Is that the word?
Yes.
Yeah, there's an injunction that says that can't happen for a while it's being reviewed in the courts. And, a lot of people are saying it's not legal, it's not going to go through. So let's hope that's true. But if it's not, Philly labor leaders are saying that if it gets upheld in the courts, there's going to be a general strike. So I think definitely students are going to be involved in that. But, I don't know. There's so much up in the air, so
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
And the sad thing is all the money and all the time and the energy that they're wasting on this, they could have been putting into classrooms with teachers and nurses and librarians and guidance counselors and, heaven forbid, doors and water fountains. If we can have those in schools as well, instead of all of this chaos. Which to me, do you get the sense that this is done on purpose for the in my view, the end result being destroying the traditional public schools so that you could privatize and profitize what's left?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it's willful. I think you would have to be an idiot not to see how this is harming the Philadelphia school district. And, these people in power are much more educated than I am. They've got like PhDs and, they're smart people. They're not dumb. So it's willful. When you label a school as failing and when you create this sense of chaos, it's much easier to justify taking rash actions like privatizing everything. Corporate ed reformers have a lot of people convinced that if you privatize a school, it'll magically become better.
Wow. Ruby, I wish you nothing but the best going forward. You are fantastic, and I would love to talk to you again at some point in the future as this continues.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Ruby. I appreciate you taking time for us.
No problem. Have a great night.
You too, Ruby Anderson, Philadelphia Public Schools. I got to tell you, just there is hope. I'm leaving you with that. Quick break. Right back.
So that's how it is. That's what we got. If the president wants to admit it or not, you can read it in the paper, read it on the wall, hear it on the wind. If you're listening at all, get out of that limo, look us in the eye, call us on a cell phone, tell us all why. In Dayton, Ohio, or Portland, Maine, or a cotton gin out on the Great High Plains. That's done closed down, along with the school and the hospital and the swimming pool. Dust devils dance in the noonday heat. There's rats in the alley and trash in the street. Gang graffiti on a boxcar door. We can't make it here anymore.
It's bad enough that the Goliaths of big beer are consuming each other in a new round of mega mergers, meaning fewer choices and higher prices for consumers. But the really bad news is that they're also going after the one bright spot on tap in bars all across the country: craft beers. These are not merely beers, but jewels of the brewer's art. Yeasty, hoppy, and malty, local delights with unique, deep flavors that put the fizzy yellow suds of Budweiser, Miller, and Coors to shame. And, not surprisingly, while the sales of big beer's fizz are declining, the craft brewers are up by 17% last year alone. And the number of craft brewers has nearly doubled since 2010. The giants have noticed, and they're responding. By making better beer? Don't be silly. Instead, they're trying to co-opt the good name of local beer makers and dupe consumers by pretending that the likes of Bud and Miller are craft brewers too. How? Two ways. First, they've created false fronts like Blue Moon Brewing Company, 10th and Blake, and Green Valley Brewery, pretending to be upstart independents. You won't see the name of Miller Coors or Anheuser-Busch on the labels, but those are the macro brewers that own and make such ersatz macro brews as Blue Moon, Killian's, and Shock Top. Second, the deep-pocketed beer behemoths are simply buying up small craft brewers, including Goose Island by Anheuser-Busch and Leinenkugel by Miller Coors. Again, they're co-opting the imagery of cool independence, but shh, it's the same old big beer hiding behind the small guys' labels. This is Jim Hightower saying, when all else fails, the giants get thuggish, using their marketing muscle and political punch to knock the craft beers out of bars and off the shelves. But the independents are scrappy, and it's up to us quaffers of real beer to stand up and drink with them.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case, I'm turning it up, it's getting cold in here, so fire it up. I got a bad case, I'm turning it up, it's getting cold in here, so somebody fire it up.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Got an email during the break from Caitlin. Caitlin says, "Oh my God, that girl is fantastic," and I agree. Boy, to hear someone of of high school age talking about solidarity and collective action, and oh, by the way, being able to withhold one's labor and not speechless, almost speechless. Those are things that. Just amazing stuff. Let's go to the phone lines. What's on your mind?
Hi, Rick. This is Carrots. I wasn't sure if I gave you.
Yeah,
you
did.
With my number.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you on hold. But you look at this, and at the end of it, what comes out of this is I listened to this girl talk about solidarity, and I listened to this girl talk about, this idea that workers should have rights, and that the children aren't failing. It's the system that's failing them. It gives me hope. I mean, I got to be honest. I look at this, and there's part of me that goes, there's some hope for tomorrow. Because you look at what's going on in Philadelphia, $1 billion having been cut from education each of the last 3 years because of this governor. You look at the fact that the public schools operated last year at a $70 million deficit, while the charter schools saw $117 million surplus. There's definitely a structural problem. And as she said, she gave herself not enough credit, saying that the people running things are smarter than she is. But she said, look, these are folks who have PhDs. These are smart people. What they're doing is absolutely willful. It's absolutely planned out. As I've been saying, it's been uncovered. We know the end game. The end game, very simple. It's to make the public schools look like they're failures, defund them, and then move everything over to the privatized model. Why? Well, I think it's pretty simple. It's all about the money. When money becomes more important than education, we've got some serious problems. And you look at, as I've been saying, Philadelphia is the first place. We just talked about the York City School District, went through the same thing, and good on them for not handing the entire district over to a failed charter operator. But the other question in this comes, we've got to be talking about funding these schools and funding these kids' future at an adequate level with a sane, rational funding formula. Because like I said earlier, no one has been able to explain to me how exactly we fund education. It's one of those things. I'm hoping the next governor I'm hoping that if Tom Wolf's the next governor, one of those things we take on. I'm going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. Also get the app on your smartphone or Stitcher, iTunes, all of that. Right back. Stick around.
And he said I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be are too great, so walk away from the rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A union born in the South is having success organizing Southern workers. Thousands of mechanics, technicians, and maintenance personnel employed by URS at the Red River Army Depot near Texarkana, Texas, just became machinist union members. That's according to Bob Wood of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers.
People are today are much more interested in unions, and they're ready to unionize, and they're ready in the South to unionize.
Wood says 925 workers at Corpus Christi Army Depot joined the union earlier this year, and there are hundreds of others at other Southern work sites that are expected to join. Wood says the South is changing, and unions are working hard with strategies to sign up more Southern workers.
This is just the beginning. We have put together a strategic plan, and we have people coming to us and wanting unions, and we've got the organizers, and we have good contracts. We have good outcomes. We have a very strong union, and union that stands up for its members, and that's the secret to success.
Graduate student employees at Yale University are hopeful that Yale will soon begin talking with them about recognizing their union and bargaining a contract. Aaron Greenberg is chair of Yale's Graduate Employees and Students Organization.
We have made clear both in the spring and then just a few days ago exactly what we're looking for. 60 miles to the north, 60 miles to the south, two universities found a way to enter into a dialogue and to negotiate with graduate employees about these issues. We hope that that happens imminently here and that we have a chance to sit down with our administration and talk about the reasons why we want to negotiate the kind of contract that we want, the kind of election that we want, and that we actually have a chance to talk with them.
Greenberg says there's a wave of academic worker organizing happening around the U.S.
It's a really exciting time for organizing academics across the country, not just in the Northeast. And the wave of organization is one that we're riding. It's one that's gotten our members very excited. And we think it's one that will ultimately allow us to succeed in sitting down with the university and actually talking about so many of the issues around our wages, around our benefits, a grievance procedure, and around really having a voice in the university as it grows.
The Indonesian Supreme Court has upheld a lower court ruling there convicting a former boss of prohibiting formation of a labor union. The court said it violates Article 28 of Indonesia's labor unions law. Hutomo Haidiat was convicted of blocking the workers from organizing at a furniture company. He fired 107 workers to bust the union organizing effort. He was sentenced to a year in prison, but East Java's High Court increased that sentence to 18 months, and the Supreme Court upheld the sentence. The criminal boss, though, has apparently fled the country rather than do his time for violating the labor law. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to connect me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. This Wednesday's go so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got fire on my mind.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. That's the sound. It's Our Future Friday, and you got to love Fridays. And one of the things I love talking about on Our Future Friday is the Wingnut Week in Review. And there have just been so much insanity, so many things to talk about. That's why I've asked Tara Teeth. He is the online producer over at the Campaign for America's Future website, ourfuture.org. Terrence, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're still alive today. That's a good. Last week it was the end of the world. It was all over.
Well, the Ebola zombie apocalypse has not yet descended upon us. Between Ebola and ISIS and gays, it's a pretty scary time if you're a right winger.
Yeah, what I haven't really heard though is the God's angry with us thing. I know after Hurricane Katrina and some of the God was angry with us. Couldn't this be God being angry with us again?
Oh, and there has been some of that. I mean, there have been.
Guess I missed it.
Yeah, it's there's the preacher in North Carolina saying that you just wait until gay marriage starts happening in North Carolina, and the Ebola crisis is going to look like nothing. The father-son evangelical duo, the Hagis, the Father John said Ebola crisis is God's punishment on America for Obama's failure to support Israel, and his son Mark said it was the sign of the end times. So
yeah, it's amazing how everything is the sign of the end times. Eventually, you've got to be right. If everything's the end of the world, eventually, once you've got to be right at some point. No,
right? And I'm an old Sunday school teacher, so I don't buy any of that.
Yeah, I mean, but as somebody who likes baseball, and I know hitting the baseball is kind of hard. 300 gets you into the Hall of Fame, but for 4 million, at some point we got to put these people on the bench, right?
Right. I mean, it's like the old stereotype of the guy walking the streets holding a sign saying the end is near. Near is relative. And
hopefully, so when he gets hit by a bus, that's the end.
Right, and you're more likely to get hit by a bus than you are to die of Ebola. I saw something today that said more Americans have been married to Kim Kardashian than have died of Ebola.
I've seen that too. But hey, the fearmongers are out today. I don't know if you saw the story, but there was a guy who went on the subway in New York and went bowling. Did you hear?
No.
Yeah, a guy in New York. He's a doctor, went over to West Africa. He came back. He rode the subway and he went bowling. That's it. It's over now. 284 million people going to die because this one guy got on a subway car.
Went bowling.
And he went bowling too. He should be beaten just for that. But the fear mongering just drives me insane.
Well, and the irony of it is that a lot of the things that they're screaming about, like, why don't we have a Surgeon General? Well, gee, why don't we have a Surgeon General? It would be nice to have someone to kind of walk the country through the facts about Ebola and tamp down some of the hysteria like Sievert Koop did.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, though, Terrence. This is, I think, a mistake by President Obama. I think this is an opportunity, while the country is obviously being fear-mongered to death, for him to say, you know what, there's a crisis here. I want everybody to come back from the Senate, confirm my Surgeon General. I'm not appointing an Ebola czar. We got a Surgeon General. Get your butts back here and do your jobs.
Got a Surgeon General who's been sitting, waiting for longer than probably anybody to get confirmed. If you're really concerned about it, fly your asses back to Washington and confirm the guy so he can get on with his job. But that's assuming that the Senate Republicans want anything to work in the first place. It doesn't do anything for them if things actually function the way that they're supposed to. They can drag the director of the CDC on television and call for his resignation, but they don't think it's a big deal that the funding for the CDC has been cut over and over again, to the point where it's no wonder that they're having a problem with responding. It's been cut $1 billion since 2002, and about 45,000 job losses at the state and local level. All of these are people who could potentially be working in some aspect on this crisis, but aren't.
Yeah, but you know, Terrence, you can't throw money at a problem.
Well, yeah, you can. You can throw money at a problem if you want to get people working on it. If you want to get knowledgeable professionals working on it who are experienced with public health, experienced with public health crises, and preparedness, yeah, you do have to throw money at it because those people don't work for free.
Yeah, and but why would we want that? There's no profit in that. Well, here's what we need to do. We need to wait till it's an absolute crisis where people are scared to death out of their mind and willing to throw you their checkbooks and their Amex cards. Go, just keep me safe. Here's all of it. And then corporations can come up with a cockamamie scheme to get your money out of you, sell you. I don't know. Have you seen the ads to buy Ebola-proof suits and Ebola gloves and all of this other stuff?
No.
See, this is what's important, Terrence. It's not about keeping people healthy and safe. It's about how do we make money off those people before they die.
This is a country where instead of passing sane gun laws, we actually have people now selling bulletproof backpacks for school children.
Oh,
there was another school shooting today.
I know.
And this is the insanity that we deal with, and we don't have a Surgeon General because the NRA doesn't like it when someone says that gun violence is a health crisis. They don't even want pediatricians to be able to ask, is there a gun in the house? A simple question.
Yeah, it's insane. The sad thing is, the bulletproof backpacks wouldn't help my kids because the school won't let them take the backpack to class with them. So it's a one thing to have it sitting in your locker. A lot of good it's going to do you there.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing.
Just nuts.
Yeah.
So let's move along to some of the fun stuff because, I got to get away from I'm scared to death because, my daughter came home from school, said 284 million people are going to die. It's the end of the world. It's all over because this is what she's hearing in school. And I'm saying, honey, you're not going to die. You got a much better chance of being struck by lightning. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine.
Right.
Let's talk about some fun stuff. One of the stories I've been following out of Michigan, and I love this guy. The audacity, I guess it's being 24. You get away with this stuff because you're 24. Evidently, there's this thing called cranking. Do you know anything about this?
Oh yeah. I wrote that guy up a while back, and it's one of the funniest things. I don't know how a guy whose fetish literally involves, if I can say this on the air, breaking into cars and hot wiring them while masturbating, has any room to rant about a gay agenda.
Well, it's because he's been forgiven. See,
tell that to his parole officer.
And that's the thing that gets me. I mean, you get these folks who do some of the most bizarre stuff and then point their finger at everybody else like they're normal.
Yeah, it's like if I had done something like that and gone to prison for it, I would be real quiet. I would not want to open my mouth because there's just it's. But that's the kind of insanity that you're dealing with, and I think this guy is still in. He had, I think, temporarily pulled out of his race, but I think he's still.
No, he's back.
Yeah, I think he's still running, which is amazing to me. I mean, I would hope that he wouldn't actually get elected, but crazier things have happened.
Well, I mean, the weird thing about it is they've actually got a name for this bizarre activity of breaking into people's cars and trying to hotwire them and sparking the wire. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you spark the wires together and pleasure yourself at the same.
I don't know either.
Is there a third hand involved? Do you need a second person?
I don't know.
These are the deep questions we should be asking this Jordan Askins guy.
I thought I'd heard of everything. I really did. I didn't think there was anything that could surprise me.
No, look, when the Republicans take over the Senate, there are going to be a lot of things that you said, I didn't think anything could surprise me by the insanity that's coming. And, you talk about insanity. You look at this Don Young guy who has gotten himself into some trouble in the past, if I remember right.
Yeah. There was the arm twisting incident.
Yeah.
That was caught on tape. And this guy, first of all, you worry about gay people. I think you should keep this guy away from your kids, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I got to be honest. Most old curmudgeons, I think you should keep your kids away from. But the longest serving Republican in the House of Representatives, you might think, he can't be all bad, right? Wrong.
But just not in the crassness of the recent suicide of a classmate, and to say that, well, it was partially your fault for failing to support the guy, and thinking, what kind of person walks into this situation and says something like that? It's one of those situations where there's really only one right thing to say.
Yeah. Well, it was in Wasilla, so maybe he thought he was in friendly territory, in Sarah Palin's backyard.
Well, he better not wind up in Sarah Palin's backyard, or he might
get beat up,
beaten and bloodied,
and screamed at in a profane manner. Have you seen Sarah Palin TV? Is it still on? Are they still doing Sarah TV, or have they given up on that yet?
I think they're still doing it. I have not been able to watch or bear watching any of it since the very first serving of word salad about, I forget what it was. Just the fact that anyone, I can't imagine many people are still listening to her.
Yeah, it's insane. The only clip I really remember that was of any memory for me is evidently a couple of guys from New Jersey went and knocked on their door, and she brought him in a really just very awkward 15 minutes of oh, why did you come? And it's just really weird and just bizarre.
I haven't even heard about that.
Yeah, it's just this fun stuff, which is why, you look at, and I got to tell you, there's part of me, Terrence, that hopes that the Republicans do take over the Senate and we get to see the agenda of the insane class, because I think there's got to be a moment where average everyday people go, wait a minute,
yeah,
you guys are crazy.
And I don't think they're going to be able to keep it in the box.
No,
I don't think that the Republican establishment is going to be able to keep it in the box. I think that the radical right-wing Tea Party contingent of the party, now that they, if they have both houses in their control, are going to demand something.
Yeah.
Whether it's an actual repeal of Obamacare that passes the Senate and goes all the way to the president for his signature, or some other action that I think is probably going to cause the rest of the country to stop and go, wait a minute. This is not what we want anyone in Washington to be about.
Yeah, you're worried about him keeping it in the box. I'm worried about this Jordan Haskins guy keep it in his pants, because cranking's one thing. What happens when he gets into the halls of power? What happens when he gets to the Michigan State House? What fetish comes up out of that?
I don't know. Hopefully he'll have a driver. I just don't know.
Just don't park next to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring wet wipes to clean up the steering wheel.
You don't want to be in the parking space next to him.
No, you sure do not.
No.
Terrence, I appreciate you taking time for us. Always great to talk with you, especially on the Wingnut Week in Review. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks.
Terrence Heath from the Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website if you want to take a look. Quick break, right back. Stick around. It's another Rick Smith Show.
I got a picture in my pocket of the lucky one. I'll announce the winner on the radio with my microphone. I do a super show. I wear a cowboy hat. It is my business hat. I'm on till 1 a.m. I must tell you that I'm a man with a mission.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Let's go to Manhattan District Court. In a rare occurrence, the UN is being sued by victims of the 2010 cholera outbreak in Haiti. Many of those victims, and an increasing roster of scientists and human rights lawyers, say a contingent of UN peacekeepers from Nepal introduced the disease to the earthquake-ravaged island. They contend the UN was negligent in deploying peacekeepers from a country experiencing a cholera outbreak of its own, and for building inadequate sanitation facilities in Haiti, where raw sewage from the peacekeepers entered the country's primary water source. Over 700,000 cholera infections have been recorded since 2010, along with more than 8,000 deaths. The UN contends it's immune from prosecution, but today one lawsuit got its day in court, with American and Haitian lawyers arguing on behalf of 5 victims and their families that the UN should be forced to account for its actions.
This case is about whether the United Nations can essentially operate with impunity when it has refused to provide any kind of remedies to the victims.
Beatrice Lindstrom is an attorney with the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, and she represented the plaintiffs in court today.
The United Nations stands for the promotion of human rights for all, and that should include Haitians. And so we asked the Secretary General to listen to Haitians when they ask for justice in this case.
The UN often cites that it's poured money into the fight to contain cholera, but when pressed to respond to victims, the organization's spokespeople and officials are either evasive or adamant they did no wrong. Here was spokesman Farhan Haq this afternoon.
The United Nations has maintained its immunity from legal process in respect of this lawsuit. In light of this, the United Nations will not appear in court.
When the U.S. District Court decides whether or not the suit against the UN can go forward, you'll hear about it here. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the lessons learned from it that changed our cities. The most thorough analysis of the fire came from Frederick Law Olmsted, a renowned landscape architect. Olmsted's analysis gave rise to significant changes in safety and building development. And credit goes also to Chicago civic and political leaders who took Olmsted's review and the recommendations of others and turned Chicago into a great American city that led the way for many other cities in the United States. Their leadership helped establish the country's first substantive fire codes. They also established a fire department full of well-trained and well-equipped firefighters. Finally, the most visible improvements came in the form of new skyscrapers of brick, stone, and mortar that became the nation's first beautiful skyline. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
When I work the times now, they don't faze me. Even if I look and act really crazy, I won't wait down, she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. Pitched the fireman when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You know, I keep thinking about that. I can't get that out of my head. What if this guy wins? What if Mr. Cranking wins? And what if you're assigned the parking space next to it? There's just something wrong with that, I think. On so many levels, there's something wrong with that. But, you know, this is the thing that gets me. You've got these, you know, these crazy people who have really, they now feel emboldened to come out of the closet, if you will, out of their cloakroom, out of their secret clubs, out of their secret societies. And all of these insane ideas are now, some think are worth discussing. And, you know, I got to be honest, there's just some things I go, you know, the cranking thing, just too weird for me. You know, it's just too weird. And look, I understand second chances, just not 6 months after you did it. I don't know. You know, it's just very weird. Anyway, today in history, in labor history, today in 1945, the minimum wage increased to 40 cents an hour. But in today's standard of living, it's about $10 an hour. Also today, 1940, the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act was signed into law about 2 years prior, actually went into effect on this day back in 1940, and that established the minimum wage, overtime, maximum hour laws, child labor laws, all of those things that the right wing wants to do away with. All of those things that we said as a civil society we should have in place. That if there's a floor, we'll all do better. And that nobody should be laying on the floor. And then one of the interesting thoughts I have in this, we don't want to see anyone, face down in a ditch somewhere. And that's what I see minimum wage as. I mean, you're basically face down in a ditch. And yet you've got so many who want to keep pushing people into that. To me, back in 2006, when here on the state level, we passed the minimum wage, there should have been an automatic adjustment with that. The indexing should have happened. But the right wing, no, they're going to fight it. The Republicans are going to fight it for a very specific reason. And I thought about this as part of the overall scheme. This is the right wing view of how you have a compliant workforce. You go back to the Reagan years. Now, Reagan had been the first president since the passage of the minimum wage, the first president not to have an increase during his tenure. In those 8 years that you saw Reagan as president, inflation went up and up and up. Wages stayed stagnant. So if inflation continues to go up and wages stay stagnant, basically you're seeing a wage cut because your wages aren't keeping up with inflation. New York Times did a mock-up that had the minimum wage kept up with inflation from the 60s forward. It would be something like $16 an hour, $17 an hour. Had wages kept up with productivity, it would have been like $22 an hour. Had the minimum wage kept up with the top 1% growth in income, it had been like $23 an hour. And, for me, you hear the right wing talk about the meritocracy. You should get paid for what you do. And I agree. I agree with that idea of a meritocracy. If your labor creates wealth, you should be able to share in it. The sad reality is that's not happening. In fact, I've talked to a number of people who the only time they've gotten raises is when the minimum wage has gone up. And that hasn't happened in the last, not in this administration either. I mean, if you look at President Reagan and President Obama, the one thing they share in common, they didn't raise the minimum wage. Now, there's hope that next year there's a push. We see an increase, but will it be enough? I mean, you're talking then 6 years of no increase. And 7 years, because you go back into the Bush administration. So you're looking at 7 years of no increase in the minimum wage, and you see this erosion of that wage. And everybody, because understand, the corporatists, the minimum wage isn't their problem. Seeing the minimum wage go up, it's that ripple effect that they're afraid of. They know that, at the bottom, you could give them another 50 or 75 cents and it wouldn't hurt anybody's bottom line. The problem is if you raise it up to, let's say, $8 an hour or $10 an hour, which they could easily do, the people making $8, $9, $10 an hour are going to go, wait a second. I should be making above minimum wage. I want 12 or 13 or 15. And there's that ripple upward through almost to the middle of the wage spectrum to where that's what they're afraid of. And they're afraid of seeing people being able to move around. You got somebody who's going, wow, you know what? I got this crummy job making, $9 an hour. Now it's going to go up to 10. Maybe I take another job that I like just as well because it's paying more than what I was making. You see some mobility. There's a lot of this that the corporatists are scared to death about. But at the end of it, they should be embracing it, because understand, we're a consumer-based economy. If you're leaving a large percentage of the consumers out, there's a problem, because they're not participating and they're not creating activity. And I think we get that, right? I mean, I think the average person understands that if you don't have people buying the widgets, no one's going to make widgets. if you don't have people who have money to buy the sad meal, no one's buying it. And if no one's buying it, no one's making it. And then there's that vicious cycle of, well, unemployment. So we've got some interesting times ahead of us. And I'm hoping this election fleshes some of it out. I don't see it. I'm not overly confident. It's going to take people getting out the vote, and I hope folks have it on their calendars. I hope November 4th, people get out the vote and vote their conscience. I'll look at the last 4 years and go, has my life been better the last 4 years here in the Commonwealth or worse? Understand the Republicans controlled the state house to the state Senate and the governor's mansion with complete and total dictatorial control. And in doing so, went from 10th in job creation to last. I don't think they deserve to be rewarded. Just my thought. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Can you answer that question that you didn't answer on stage? Do you think man contributes to climate change or not?
Republican candidates still dodging the climate change question.
There is a personal cost paid by those families who live near coal mining sites.
Mountaintop removal coal mining promotes lung cancer. Another day, another oil spill, this time in Louisiana. 2014 is on track to be the hottest year on record. Plus, everything is awesome. Lego breaks up with Shell Oil.
All of those breakups and more straight ahead. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do you believe climate change in part is caused by activities of man?
Yes.
Wow, finally, a direct answer from a Tea Party candidate for governor of Connecticut.
But not the activities necessarily that some scientists believe they are.
No, brother. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, all campaign season long, we have been tracking these Republican candidates as they have been asked about climate change really for the first time in any election cycle. And the dodges and dancing has really been extraordinary to watch.
I know. It's kind of funny. Republican candidates have been trying to evade the question of whether they accept the scientific consensus on man-made global warming. Most recently, in the Connecticut governor's race, here's the Republican nominee, front-runner Tom Foley.
Mr. Foley, what do you think the cause of climate change is?
Well, what I've said is it doesn't really matter. It's happening. So if a leader and people in positions of public responsibility need to address a threat. So I don't think there's any debate about whether or not it's happening. So we have to find solutions.
So it's happening, perhaps by magic, but we need to do something about it. Okay, that's progress.
Connecticut's governor, Democrat Daniel Malloy, was unequivocal.
Of course it matters. And yes, we've had Irene and Sandy and storms in months that we've never had snow in before and amounts of snow that we've never seen before. Of course, climate change is real. Of course, it's beaten us up. Of course, it's cost us money. And to deny that is to deny reality.
He says deny reality like that's a bad thing or something.
Well, not to Joe Visconti, the Tea Party Republican running as an independent in the Connecticut governor's race. He's got news for scientists.
I believe we are in climate change, but it may not be global warming. There's a book called Chill. You all should look at it. Chill is the name of the book, and it talks about the fluctuations of the climate and actually moving more into a mini ice age.
Unbelievable, the dancing and dodging. How about just going with science?
Meanwhile, the real scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are also unequivocal. The planet is now on pace for 2014 to be the hottest year on record. The last 12-month period was the hottest 12-month stretch on record. And NOAA also says ocean warming is accelerating. Although some of these non-scientists claim we've had no global warming in 18 years, a NOAA scientist tells AP, quote, "No one bothered to tell the globe that." Now, the question is, if 2014 does end up being the hottest year on record, will the deniers stop saying we're in global cooling?
Of course not. Why would they? They've got fossil fuel industry money they need to make. These elections aren't just going to run themselves, Des.
Cleanup has begun after an oil pipeline rupture in a northern Louisiana bayou over the weekend dumped an estimated 170,000 gallons of crude oil into a residential area. Residents were evacuated, but 140 wild animals didn't get that warning and have been confirmed dead. Mountaintop removal coal mining again linked to lung cancer.
Federal government has to conduct a study on the health impact of mountaintop removal before it issues any more permits.
That was Representative John Yarmouth, Democrat of West Virginia, in a congressional hearing last July calling for a moratorium on federal permits for mountaintop removal coal mining. And not a moment too soon, a new West Virginia University study has found that the dust from mountaintop removal coal mining actually promotes the growth of lung cancer tumors. The study confirms previous research showing families living near coal operations have increased risk of cancer, birth defects, and early death. Dr. Matthew Wasson of Appalachian Voices tells Congress it's ample evidence for a federal moratorium on mountaintop removal.
There's too much information showing health problems to continue to ignore.
You know, when you've got a congressman from West Virginia, of all places, Democrat or not, calling for a moratorium on mountaintop removal coal mining, it seems like people ought to be standing up and paying attention.
Finally, some good news in a blow to Shell Oil's PR strategy to get its logo on children's toys. Lego has now announced it will not renew its contract with Shell Oil after a creepy viral video by Greenpeace depicting Lego toys drowning in oil.
Everything is awesome.
So no more of those little Shell Oil logos on my Lego set?
That's right.
That's just so sad. For much more on that story and all of the other ones we covered and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website where everything is awesome at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when you get a dream.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
And welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the big news is in. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago I was talking about class pictures, I guess, are being taken, senior pictures are being taken, and there was this school up in Schenectady, New York, that said, no, the kid couldn't have his senior picture being with his cat, which I just thought was weird that the kid would want to take a picture, his senior picture with a cat. And I'm like, if I'm his parents, I smack him and tell him no. But, you know, some people said, hey, if you're this kitty, let him. And there's a big to-do, and I'm still not sure if they did. But I saw today that evidently the Broken Bow Public Schools District there in Nebraska is going to allow the students to take pictures with their guns. So guns, yes, kitties, no. Very, very bizarre to me. Just very bizarre to me. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world. And in New York City, I've got Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure thing.
So what do you think? Should you be allowed to take your high school picture with your kitty or with an assault weapon?
You know, I'm taking baby steps. I'm first trying to petition Ellen Ratner to let me take my Talk Radio News staff portrait with a gun. So if I can get progress there, then I think every American should have a similar right to be able to do so.
Yeah. Okay. It's just, you know, I remember going back to those days, and I never wanted to take my senior picture anyway, let alone, I don't know. It just seems dumb to me. But hey, if you want your picture with an assault weapon, I don't think I have a problem with it.
I think you understand. I'm talking out of the side of my mouth here. I think this is absolutely crazy, but I do like the cat idea.
It is nuts. And then hopefully in school you learn, don't look down the little hole and pull the trigger. You know, or maybe that's how we used to thin the herd. I don't know. Let's move on. I understand that the president had a meeting today with the woman who was now declared Ebola free, the woman from Texas.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an attempt to try to soothe fears that even when people are purported to be, non-communicable of this disease anymore, though they've recovered, that they are indeed safe to be around. I think that's probably the intent of the president's move there. We are seeing some big action, it looks like, at the federal level, potentially coming down the line over the weekend regarding not a travel ban, if you will, but mandatory quarantines for aid workers returning from West Africa to the United States. Just, before coming on the air, I saw that Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, and Chris Christie, the New Jersey governor, held a joint press conference down in Lower Manhattan at the World Trade Center, where they said New York and New Jersey together are going to do a mandatory quarantine on any aid workers now entering this area. I guess that would be Newark and LaGuardia and JFK, who have come back and had direct contact with Ebola patients. The federal government says this is being considered, but it is not something they're ready to put in place. It looks like because of this incident in New York, these two states are going to get out a little bit in front and see if this kind of policy will work.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that all I've heard is the guy went bowling. And I said, he probably should just be smacked for going bowling, even without the Ebola. But I guess he took a subway. He's on the subway a couple of times, went bowling. I'm of the mindset, don't you quarantine yourself? Don't you at some point go, there's this that's possible, kind of stay away for a little bit? Just a thought.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely occurred to me, and, all the more so because here at the United Nations today, the spokesperson was asked a few times, so what the UN policy is for staff coming back from these countries. And it's definitely something that's crossed my mind before. I mean, the UN seems like the perfect place for this kind of disease to spread because you have diplomats and other high-ranking officials from these countries who perhaps unwittingly got exposed. They don't want to declare. They have a diplomatic passport. They're not going to want to go through a quarantine. They might be the people who are trying to push the limits, skirt the rules, and could, in fact, be the people who communicate this disease. It's a disease that often is spread by people who are more affluent, people that can leave the country and have high levels of mobility. What the UN said is, look, we're going to do a voluntary self-monitoring. You should stay at home and check your temperature twice a day. At 3 points during your potential incubation period of 21 days, we'll send a nurse over to you and just do sort of an independent check on your health. As of this point, the UN is not preventing staff from coming right back, to the United States, and they're not putting in force any sort of mandatory quarantining. It's just voluntary. And so this whole bowling incident raises the question really about, you'd think someone this informed who had this much contact with patients would be able to follow protocol a little bit more closely. And it turns out people really aren't capable of that in some of these cases.
Well, is it possible that he just says, it's not, I'm not going to go swapping bodily fluids with anyone. And so maybe there's this thought that it can't be transmitted other than through the transfer of fluids. And the last time I checked, bowling wasn't a fluid transfer kind of activity. I just didn't think it was.
Well, look, on one hand, I do sympathize with this agreement quite a lot. And frankly, if there are people out there who we could hope to trust to be able to monitor their own health, to be able to make an informed decision about when they have developed a fever, I'm sure he was pretty in touch with his body. I mean, he apparently went for a 3-mile run just a few hours before coming down with this major fever. I don't think he would have done that if he thought he was getting very ill. So perhaps he was very informed about his own health. He pushed it right up to the limit, and it seems like as soon as he developed these symptoms, he got himself medical attention. So, if that would be a good thing, because in a city like this, you really don't want someone to be contagious for too long before seeking care. So hopefully he did it right. But again, it raises so many questions about whether this should be a decision people are permitted to make on their own.
Because all of the talk that I've heard today, I've had a number of people, saying, well, we should fine him or he should go to jail or public whippings or something. Should there be a penalty for people who are in this situation? I mean, is that where we have to go for people to have some common sense?
Well, look, I've when we first dealt with Mr. Duncan, the now deceased man who traveled from West Africa to Dallas, I was on the radio saying that if this man recovers, he should be charged. That was because we did know I believe he left Liberia, the president of that country, saying he had falsified statements on travel documents, immigration documents, about being in certain places, being in contact with people who had been ill. So in those cases where if it doesn't look like this man who came over and came to New York, to our best understanding, falsified any claims to immigration or to health officials. If he did, though, I think you absolutely should charge him. I think you want to make sure people are being honest, but at the same time, you have to hold them accountable when they are knowingly misleading officials about these kind of things. So I don't know the particulars of his case, but I don't have a blanket opposition to going after people even once they've recovered. I think that really hammers home the fact that honesty about your movement is the top priority here.
And some responsibility. I understand there's a report that there's a new country in Western Africa that's got an Ebola situation going on.
Yeah, this is a confirmed case. So this is not just we're not just thinking there's Ebola in the country of Mali. It has been confirmed. This is a 2-year-old girl. I am sort of sharing the worst here. Apparently, she's been very, very ill for about 5 days. She was traveling with her grandmother from Guinea. They were riding on public transit for about 48 hours, transferring from bus to bus. At that time, she was apparently, this is pretty graphic stuff, was bleeding and was very ill. She, has been tracked to have been in a number of different cities. This is kind of the opposite of the case in New York. You have someone in New York who, again, it looks like checked into quarantine very quickly after developing symptoms. This girl in Mali could have infected hundreds of people along all these different transit corridors, and she was sick, I believe, for about 4 days with these symptoms while traveling.
Wow.
I would guess her grandmother is a very good candidate for also being infected, but unfortunately probably many other people. So if you compare these two developments today, the one from Mali and the one from New York, I have to say I'm more worried about the one from Mali, but it's obviously going to be pushed way down on the headline list.
Yeah, I've traveled with infants in the past. That's no fun. I can't imagine an infant this sick, and I can't imagine that the people around them weren't aware that something was seriously wrong.
Well, it's my understanding that upon arriving in Mali, this again is a few days after developing symptoms, did go to a hospital. They tested her positive for typhoid, I think. So that could have been sort of a conclusion that distracted the Ebola diagnosis. They're saying, oh, this is not Ebola, this is typhoid.
Right.
And I think she was discharged and sent elsewhere. It's sad that you could really contract two terrible diseases at once, but unfortunately, it looks like what happened here.
Wow, that's horrible. And I can imagine, I would have to imagine not a good prognosis for this child.
No, I haven't heard, I haven't seen data specifically about how children who are this young react or what their mortality rate is compared to parents, but just the fact that she's so late into her sickness as she's beginning to receive medical help now, that just does not bode well for her case, I don't think.
Yeah. So I see the UN Security Council agreed on something. What was it and why?
Well, hey, this is a good one. So over in Somalia, in the Horn of Africa, this failed state, if you will, has been under an arms embargo since 1992, which is just astonishing to think about. I mean, most countries that face these kind of sanctions graduate beyond them pretty quickly. They can sort of sort out the situation on the ground, make some public assurances, and then they're able to import as many weapons as they want again. Somalia's been under that ban for 22 years, and they've been under a charcoal trade ban for 2 years. I didn't really know much about the background here, but apparently the terrorist group Al-Shabaab derives a large portion of its funding from the illegal trade in charcoal. And so to try and clamp down on this trade, both in the charcoal and the weapons, the UN Security Council today resolved that any country that is operating a boat off the waters of Somalia that has a reasonable suspicion that there are arms or charcoal on board that boat can intercept the boat, they can board it and begin inspecting the cargo. And if they find that there are weapons, that there is charcoal on the boat, they can either, dispose of the contents of the ship or sell it on one of the sort of secondary markets that's approved by the United Nations. So this would seem to be a real step towards trying to get some effectiveness out of this long-standing embargo, which it seems like, obviously, if steps like this are necessary, its past 22 years of existence haven't proved too useful. So hopefully this can help stabilize the situation there and choke off al-Shabaab.
Wow, something with some actual bite to it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would not want to be one of these ships that just has to go aboard others and inspect them. It sounds like a pretty grueling process, and potentially very dangerous. I don't know exactly who's going to be signing up to do these missions, but the UN did spell it out in pretty detailed lists that I was reading earlier. The fact that any member state of the UN who wants to do this you can form. They sort of encouraged multiple countries to form a maritime alliance to do these kind of inspections. We'll see if one of those sprouts up. It would seem to be a common sense idea.
Well, maybe you can outsource it to the Somali pirates and get them out of doing the pirate gig and get them into this. Make them go straight.
Oh, that's an interesting movie for Tom Hanks down the line.
I understand on Sunday there's some elections in Tanzania.
Tunisia.
Tunisia.
The birthplace of the Arab Spring back in 2011. It's one of the only countries, if you really think about it, that's successfully undergone a democratic transition. And I had to put an asterisk there because I think these elections, as well as presidential elections next month, are going to really decide whether or not that's the case. But their president, Ben Ali, stepped down after was forced out of office, essentially, in 2011. And instead of what happened in Egypt, where you had these repressed Islamist parties like the Muslim Brotherhood sprout up in popularity and then crumble, in Tunisia, there's been more accommodation. You did have the Islamist party rise to power and win sort of a constituency election a few years after that. But since then, things have been pretty amicable. Whenever there are differences that arise, negotiation has usually been possible. And so now we have parliamentary elections. Political polls are apparently banned in that country, which is something that I think would be a useful reform here in the U.S., though you could never really do it. But we don't know exactly who's leading in these polls. It looks like the Islamist and the secular parties, the two prominent ones, are going to sort of balance each other out. But this will be fascinating to see how this country balances, these first elections since the Arab Spring. Hopefully things go well. There have been some incidents between security forces and these terrorist groups who are apparently linked to Al-Qaeda. We'll see how things go. The election is on Sunday. And as sort of a long-term heads up, I will be traveling to Tunisia next month for their presidential elections. So I am, sort of nervously watching the headlines this week to see how this parliamentary vote goes. And hopefully it's smooth. There are apparently 50,000 soldiers deployed all around the country to try to maintain order, and I'm sure they will be a very visible presence when I go there next month.
Yeah, good for you. And better, again, like most of these things, better you than me. And finally, I understand Poland has taken some steps towards ending childhood obesity. Are they stealing from Michelle Obama?
Kind of. This is a school lunch reform plan. The Polish parliament has overwhelmingly passed. I mean, this is not something eking through the Senate and the House. This is like a 90% support in the legislature to ban soda, potato chips, and hamburgers from school lunches. And it's funny. I mean, I've talked to doctors who say, a hamburger is or can be a healthy part of a diet. It's not necessarily in and of itself unhealthy, but the hamburgers were included in this ban. What I think is kind of interesting about it, and why I believe it does go above and beyond what Michelle Obama tried to do with school lunches, that it also impacts, it's kind of like the cigarette regulations, where businesses operating within a certain radius of schools will also not be permitted to sell these things. And advertising for sodas, burgers, and chips will also be prohibited in these areas. So they're really trying to reshape the landscape in a country where just over half of the population now is considered overweight. So hopefully it'll turn things around there. I'm Polish myself and was there last year. And 10 years previous, and did have to concede that I saw kind of a bulking up in the population. So perhaps this would be a nice change and lead to a healthier lifestyle for Poland's young people.
There you go. I'm sure they've got the same crazy right-wingers over there saying, how dare they tell me what I can't eat and what my kids are allowed to eat.
You bet. I just can't understand them.
Yeah, because I remember there was a TV commercial that was going around when they were talking about doing the soda tax. And there were the two mothers pushing shopping carts around the grocery store going, how dare they tell us what we can allow our children to drink? And I'm going, nobody's telling you you can't. They're just telling you you're going to have to pay a little bit more for it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm kind of in favor of this kind of legislation at the school level. I think they didn't say you couldn't bring in a burger if you wanted to. These things are cheap enough that it's not like not having your chips at school is going to prevent you from ever eating potato chips. So I think, look, provide some healthy, good options at schools and let people figure it out at home if they really don't like it.
I'm with you. And at some point, there's got to be an adult somewhere near the room. That's it. Luke, I appreciate you taking time. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week.
Good thing. Take care.
Thanks so much. Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
It's bad enough that the Goliaths of big beer are consuming each other in a new round of mega mergers, meaning fewer choices and higher prices for consumers. But the really bad news is that they're also going after the one bright spot on tap in bars all across the country: craft beers. These are not merely beers, but jewels of the brewer's art. Yeasty, hoppy, and malty, local delights with unique, deep flavors that put the fizzy yellow suds of Budweiser, Miller, and Coors to shame. And, not surprisingly, while the sales of big beer's fizz are declining, the craft brewers are up by 17% last year alone. And the number of craft brewers has nearly doubled since 2010. The giants have noticed, and they're responding. By making better beer? Don't be silly. Instead, they're trying to co-opt the good name of local beer makers and dupe consumers by pretending that the likes of Bud and Miller are craft brewers too. How? Two ways. First, they've created false fronts like Blue Moon Brewing Company, 10th and Blake, and Green Valley Brewery, pretending to be upstart independents. You won't see the name of Miller Coors or Anheuser-Busch on the labels, but those are the macro brewers that own and make such ersatz macro brews as Blue Moon, Killian's, and Shock Top. Second, the deep-pocketed beer behemoths are simply buying up small craft brewers, including Goose Island by Anheuser-Busch and Leinenkugel by Miller Coors. Again, they're co-opting the imagery of cool independence, but shh, it's the same old big beer hiding behind the small guys' labels. This is Jim Hightower saying, when all else fails, the giants get thuggish, using their marketing muscle and political punch to knock the craft beers out of bars and off the shelves. But the independents are scrappy, and it's up to us quaffers of real beer to stand up and drink with them.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13. Would you?
I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, to bless my soul, you load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Yes. Oh, my soul to the company store. Absolutely. What a great program we've had today. You know, I'm still stuck with the young girl we talked to from the Philadelphia School District, the student there from Philly, who just, if you missed any part of the program today, I suggest you go back and get the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Get the app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. This way you don't miss it. What an amazing young woman, and gives me hope when you have someone talking about solidarity and being able to withhold one's labor and community and at such a young age to have that kind of insight gives me hope. It really absolutely does. And remember, this weekend is going to be a good weekend, but keep the eye on November 4th. And if you haven't marked it on the calendar, I suggest you do it now so that you don't forget. Get out big red crayon if you need it. But I'm telling you, this is one of the most important elections in the last 20 years, in my view. It's that important. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you tuning in. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Rick